Hey friends, welcome to the channel. So here's another interesting story of DEKU. What if DEKU had Doomsday Quirk? Part 1. I give full credits to authors in the starting of the video. If you want to see more stuff like this, then please subscribe to the channel and also do check the talented author of this captivating story. What doesn't kill me by the silver boar? Please search it on Google. So let's begin. While contentedly drinking his tea, Nezu looked out at the several displays displaying the different heroics entrance exam battle sites. He was impressed with how prepared and serious each site appeared to be. Until he arrived at Site B, where he observed one of his applicants frowning at another nervous-looking boy and firmly grasping the green-haired potential's shoulder, while the majority of other applicants laughed and mocked the scene. The audio carried remarks like, "One less bit of competition to worry about," and "Not needing to worry about that one," with some even mentioning that another applicant had disclosed the green-haired boy's quirk to them. Such impolite conduct. The other teachers were observing the scenario as well, not caring that they wouldn't be viewing other screens because they would be watching the film from every site over the course of the week to determine who deserved how many rescue points. Nezu grumbled at the obvious bullying from those looking to pursue a career in heroism. It is nonsensical to reject a potential applicant in that manner. With a sigh, Aizawa took a long pull from one of his many juice pouches. All of them watched as the green-haired boy forced his way to the front of the group to wait for the gates to open, finally allowing his frustration and anger to overcome his nervousness. He shoved off the boy holding his shoulder. None of the others attempted to oppose or stop him because they didn't think he posed much of a threat. Nezu watched as Present Mike gave the go-ahead and the boy took off, his skin turning a dark gray with what appeared to be the beginnings of formed spikes at various points. His shirt tore apart and his trousers stretched as he grew another couple of feet. When they discovered his peculiarity, they stopped worrying. Nezu saw that the applicants were equally surprised by the shift, and Vlad King gaped, taken aback. Humming to himself, Nezu began retrieving files and found those transmitted to Site B, Izuku Midoriya, Quirk. Adaptation. With ease. The description of his quirk made Nezu's blood run cold. It's a transformation quirk. Nezu, what is the issue? With a troubled cough, All Might questioned Nezu's silence. His peculiarity is his ability to adjust to past experiences. A part of it is said to be a PEV healing element that, as long as he's alive, allows him to recover from almost anything in 24 hours. Nezu began with the less worrisome part first. If it takes 24 hours, it's not the best for hero work right away, but it would certainly facilitate recovery. While the other teachers listened, probably curious by Nezu's response, Recovery Girl pondered. And as I've stated, his form changes as he perseveres. His skin became stronger in his changed state when sufficient harsh force was used against him. He resists fire as a result of his burns. Every time, loud noises and blinding lights lose their effectiveness. With his eyes fixed on the screen, Nezu shut the folder and witnessed the applicant deflect a missile from one of the one-pointers, seizing the robot and tearing it apart. Is it true that he will be able to manage a conflict better the longer it lasts? Midnight pondered the potential uses of this ability as she inquired. It's not per bout, sorry, it is unchangeable. Nezu grimaced, saying, according to his file, he only fully learned this 10 months ago when he was attacked by a villain and terrified into a different person. He had not used his quirk since he was 4 years old till that point. He hadn't had time to build up any resistance to it, so at first it only made his skin a little bit gray. However, in the time between it emerging and that incident 10 months ago, his altered condition has developed a strong defense against harsh light, loud noises, blunt force trauma, fire resistance, pain, and even falling from tremendous heights. Everyone in the room was aware of how many people could be offended by quirks, particularly if they were perceived as weak. As a result, many resistances implied that the child was reckless or deliberately developed his quirks. A claim they all knew wasn't true given that he had reportedly only recently learned of it or had been the target of bullying from others who took advantage of his quirks. If he turned evil, as Izuku deflected an attack from 3-pointers and other applicants, throwing them up to the robots for handling while he attended to an injured student, Power Loader trembled. Nezu was so relieved that the child wasn't yet too jaded for it that she couldn't disguise it. That crowd said that someone else had informed them about his peculiarity. Leaning forward, Ectoplasm retrieved the records as well. In Site A, there is only one other student from Midoriya's school, and that is Katsuki Bakugo. A quick glance at the television revealed a manic-grinding, aggressive-looking youth blowing up robots. If they both pee, they won't be in the same CL. Nezu urted, eyes demonstrating that he had not broken any arguments, not that his staff would. Whether the boys ped or not, this was a significant subject they would need to investigate. Both of them needed to be carefully steered to prevent such a fate, as they both had deadly peculiarities that would make for scary villains, if even half of what he feared was true. Izuku with a growl. Izuku ripped apart yet another one-pointer, indifferent to the sensation of metal piercing his hands and the sluggish bleeding from his gashed palms. It wasn't like it really mattered, they'd be fine in a few hours anyway. The explosions from his former friend, Kachan, injured more nevertheless. Izuku clenched his teeth, felt an explosion strike his back, and looked towards the source. He threw the remaining scraps of the one-pointer at the three-pointer that had ambushed him from behind, using his hands. Despite the aches all throughout his body, he chose to ignore them in search of more robots to destroy. He needed to enter USA have to disprove everyone. Before he could locate another robot, though, he felt the ground tremble and loose stones from collapsed buildings started to fall. Everyone started to fear and looked around in a frenzied manner before realizing that the Meve metal monster was rising. Is that our zero-pointer? Another applicant gave a terrified scream, and the stain that was darkening on the front of his trousers revealed exactly what the coward was thinking as he fled like a headless chicken. That coward was the tipping point because, while not all of the other applicants adopted his fashion trend of crap trousers, Izuku noticed that every other applicant was starting to do the same. HI stance. A faint sound emanated from the zero-pointer's root, and Izuku's shielded hearing picked it up, but others were probably struggling to hear it following the enormous robot's explosive appearance. He turned when he noticed a recognizable brown-haired head and shifted. The sum of years of dealing with the bastards in his life, of everyone staring down at him, and years of building up anger and contempt, eventually forced him to push past his nerves and let out a primal howl. The brunette girl who had iced at him at the school entrance moments before saw him charging, his steps loud as they pounded the ground, and that's when he heard the scream. When he arrived, he observed that she was pinned down by a big slab of concrete and that her ankle wasn't in the best of shape. Remain motionless. With a growl, Izuku lifted the enormous block so she could squeeze out from beneath it. He watched as she struggled to stand, screamed, and fell, holding what appeared to be a fractured ankle. Izuku threw aside the debris and grabbed her, the one-pointer concentrating on her while he ran beside her. The other candidates were either observing or continuing to flee in an attempt to save their own skins. Izuku snorted as he flung the brunette girl towards them, the morons scrambling to stay awake as they snatched her. He could hear the bot approaching and saw some of the hopefuls standing nearby, just waiting to be picked. Present Mike asked for the exam to finish just before the robot was about to backhand Izuku into a wall, causing his leg to break under the force and erupting in pain. The robot then slowed to a stop. Izuku removed himself from the wall and walked towards the approaching woman dressed as a nurse, ignoring the looks and murmurs from the other applicants who were just standing there and staring at him with his leg bent in an obviously unhealthy way. He used a torn-out light post as a crutch. Why did she seem annoyed that he was visiting her, and why did it make him anxious? With a perpetual smirk on his face, Bakugo went back to working out in his room, using the pull-up bar he had constructed to keep himself in good shape. He forced himself to strive, enjoying in his mind's eye the recollection of defeating those foolish robots and proving UA exactly how the next number one appeared. The old hag's yelling, "Oi!" cut short his thoughts. Katsuki. A correspondence from UA arrived to get you. It's about damn time. I want to know how well they scored me on this, Katsuki thought to himself as he fell and threw open the door to retrieve his letter. You little brat. Language. The old man sighed in frustration as he observed Katsuki and his mother dispute. His mother chastised him, giving him a whack on the head for stealing his letter. I'll talk for as long as I wish. What the? He yelled back as he tore open the package to expose a little disc. It looked to me like it was meant to be a letter. It's a disc for recording. Speaking up, his father took the device from Katsuki's grasp and turned it on. A countdown timer appeared on the tiny screen, and Katsuki waited for the person who was supposed to be on the darn thing. Hi there, cute little Bakugo. You must be pretty perplexed right now because the screen showed the happy face of All Might as soon as the countdown finished. I am. You can bet your damn. His mother chastised him for swearing once more, and he screamed at the tape, disobeying his father's observation that the recording couldn't hear him. I have been keeping that a surprise for you and all of your new CL mates, though, I am the newest faculty member at U as of this year. Academy. With a proud smile, All Might gave the screen a thumbs up. Yeah, screw it. With a happy yell, his hands exploding with little explosions that he was unable to control due to his joy. Let's go on to your scores. With a score of 94%, you performed exceptionally well on the written exam, ranking among the top 5 candidates for the entrance exam. All Might declared as Katsuki beamed with smug satisfaction, putting aside his frustration that his score wasn't the best and that the practical was all that really important. There were 2 criteria used to determine the score for the combat test. The rescue points and the villain points you were informed of. After all, this is a school for heroes, so how can we claim to be one if we don't recognize and celebrate heroic behavior among our students? Most likely for the helpless losers who are unable to succeed as real fighting heroes. As the top scores began to show on a screen below the top hero, Katsuki grinned smugly. Even though you didn't receive any rescue points, young Bakugo, your villain point total of 77 was the highest of the day, placing you second on the exam. With a smile, All Might seem not to have just delivered terrible news. The second? There was nobody superior to Katsuki Bakugo? The man moved aside to reveal the chart, and as he did so, he looked at the top to see what stupidity he would have to overcome. His blood immediately froze when he saw the name, Izuku Midoriya, with a total of 58 villain points and 83 rescue points. Nearly twice as many as Katsuki had. There's no way that Little didn't cheat. There was absolutely no way in hell that Katsuki could ever be defeated at anything by someone with a quirk as worthless as going gray. Oh my goodness, Midoriya. Both Katsuki and his mother stared at the man in amazement as a result of his father's statements and the realization that the recording had ended. What topic are you discussing? Izuku the little one received the greatest score. Why do you feel sorry for him? When Katsuki's mother heard him snarl at the mention of their scores, she sent him a sharp look. Due to the teachers of the boys. With a shake of his head, his father indicated that the CL lists had evidently been displayed while he was preoccupied with figuring out how DEKU had duped you. Katsuki has found a great mentor in Sekijiro-kan, popularly known as the Blood Hero. Vlad King, as the latter's quirk also involves using one of his body fluids as a weapon. As such, he would be the ideal person to assist Katsuki in honing his own quirk utilization. A minimum of UA was igning him a competent instructor, whereas Izuku's teacher is a man named Shota Aizawa. When Katsuki watched his father take off his spectacles to soothe his weary eyes, I did some research on the different instructors at the school to get a sense of who would be teaching Katsuki and learned about him. The individual is either an underground hero or an early retiree, but I was unable to locate his identity, and he has a bad reputation. He decided they had little potential and, on orientation day of the previous year, he expelled the entire CL. This comprised 6 of the top 10 entrance exam scores, including the top spot, and half of the recommended candidates. If Izuku hopes to survive the first day, he has his work cut out for him. At that, Katsuki grinned, his rage beginning to fade. What if DEKU had initially cheated on the test? He knew the damn imposter would be sent packing as soon as possible, now that he knew exactly who would be instructing the little crap. Perhaps eventually driving the lesson home into his thick skull would be to have a small amount of hope built up and then smashed at the top. Nezu, I appreciate you being here today. Nezu gave a nod in the direction of Yokomiru Mera, the Public Safety Commission representative, who appeared just as worn out as usual. It's true that you were in a dire circumstance. Mera's hero escort declined, and the man sighed and cracked his neck even as Nezu poured them both tea. But really, did you really need 2 watch list students? And distinct listings too? Although I didn't think they were worthy of being on the list, I won't take a chance. Nezu put his paws together and told him, his eyes serious, that the first is one Katsuki Bakugo. He exhibits an extremely explosive temperament, albeit there isn't much data to support this at this time. I'm currently keeping him on a low-level watch list because of his quirk's volatility and ease of abuse, as well as other indications that he has abused it in the past. Though he would have preferred a more conclusive response, Given how limited the boy's records are, it was the best he could do given that the boy's previous schools were obviously concealing up something. Fairly easy. Mara nodded. The man was probably used to receiving around a dozen cases a year about a student with a dangerous quirk and a big head joining a hero school and being watched to make sure their conceit didn't drive them crazy. You mentioned the second student was for a separate list, right? Yes, and his peculiarity is even more harmful. The first boy has the ability to sweat something that resembles nitroglycerin and that he can store and even explode at command. But this boy, Izuku Midoriya, has a transformational trait known as adaptation, which allows him to recover from almost anything in a matter of hours and improve his ability to adapt the next time he encounters a challenge, growing to be a better handler of it. Based on the youngster's report and exam results, I think that prior to his quirk being officially recognized, other kids who viewed it as weak or useless would frequently use their own peculiarities to abuse or torment the boy. Though he's not yet cynical enough to turn villainous, I'm concerned if something causes him to cross that line. Is that all? That's what scared you so much? Aizawa's former school opponent and current pro-hero, Mr. Blaster, scoffed mockingly at Mara's hero escort. If you're getting that chicken as you get older, perhaps it's time for you to retire. Sensoji, you seem just as bold as ever. Nezu squinted, not understanding the remark from his former student, but since you obviously need a lesson, let me teach you like I used to. I hope this time around you'll get a better grade. Because of this boy's peculiarity, he can adapt, therefore let's imagine a scene where he became evil and started battling you. It's an extremely difficult fight that you are both engaged in, but in the end, he escapes after realizing he will not prevail. Despite suffering from severe injuries, both of you are still alive. After a few days, he reappears, fully recovered, and you are no longer performing at your best. Furthermore, compared to the previous time, your explosions aren't harming him as much. Even if you succeed, he will simply return the following day, fully recovered and even more impervious to your efforts. Opposition that never goes away. Additionally, he has to choose from a variety of PEV resistances, so as long as he's in his altered state, he won't have to worry about sneak ults. Additionally, he could always have his companion stand at the back, prepared to pull him out in the event that he lost, if he finds someone with a warp or teleportation quirk. With enough time, this boy could get strong enough to overcome all opposition to the point where it would be like watching a pro battle a toddler without any peculiarities. That is the reason I'm so concerned. I'm going to try my hardest to keep it from happening. However, the Commission and other heroes are informed and prepared in case I fail. Mara let out a tired sigh of irritation and drained his tea in a single drink as the shaken pro-hero prudently backed away after his tirade and look. Nezu, you simply need to IGN me more job, don't you? The man picked up the reports and paperwork and said, I'll have the commission ready. You just do what you can. That way, all that will come of this will be my complaining about time squandered and missed naps. Izuku frowned and cast a sidelong check at his schedule as he made his way through UA's vast hallways, seeking to locate his homeroom. Could they not have incorporated a map? He complained to himself while exercising his grasp using a grip training equipment in his other hand. He had started training to help him cope with his anxiety. Are you all right over there? Izuku turned to see a girl with orange hair smiling at him, her uniform indicating that she was also a first-year hero course student, when he heard a voice he didn't recognize. I'm a little lost. Izuku meekly acknowledged, I'm looking for CL1A. Yes, I agree. It's good to meet you. My name is Itsuka Kendo. He shook her hand and extended it to the now-named Orangette, who was also his CL mate. Midoriya Izuku. They headed back to locate their CL room, and he nodded. Wait, as in Midoriya, number 1 on the entrance exam? As they turned a corner and, happily, saw a sign poking out of the wall that said 1A, Kendo's eyes widened in disbelief. Yes, when I saw my ranking, I was a little taken aback. Izuku acknowledged that she was unaware of the concept of rescue points. Every time he moved to east the other applicants who hadn't been holes to him, he felt like he'd lost a lot of points. That makes sense to me. As I admit, I didn't think I would place 5th. As they walked into the CL room, Kendo nodded. Izuku noticed that, although Bakugo had thankfully not been spared, the guy with the blue hair who had been criticizing him during the examinations was present. Well, everyone is present. From the shadowed corner came a voice, seemingly unheard by the CL, as the 18 other students in CL1A who had followed Kendo and himself inside the room leapt with surprise. A man wearing all black clothing emerged from the shadows. A long gray scarf wrapped around his neck and eyes, giving Izuku a queasy feeling. Throughout your time at UA, I, Shota Aizawa, will be your homeroom instructor. At least as long as you're enrolled in the heroism course. What are you discussing, sir? Why would you expect us to leave this course now that we are here? The guy with the blue hair from the exam got up, slicing the air robotically, and screamed. I shall be direct. I hold the hero profession and myself to extremely high standards. Aizawa took a juice pouch out of somewhere and drained it. That implies that I will have great expectations of you. Your head will spin if I think you're wasting my time, don't have the potential, or aren't giving it your all. In that case, I'll have you removed from this course and sent to general education. I had to deport every student in 1A last year. If you don't believe me, look over the CL records. Are you really saying that CL2A doesn't exist? A youthful-sounding outfit that he imagined just held an unseen female shouted in surprise. No, one exists. Aizawa didn't appear to be bothered by the psychological abuse everyone was receiving. If students from previous courses demonstrate aptitude and desire, they may be transferred to the hero course. In other words, even if you make my cut, a competent student from one of the other classes could grab your seat if you're not careful. However, you have the opportunity to earn your way back if I boot you out. Izuku witnessed a boy who had purple balls for hair, one of his CL mates, break down into frenzied sobbing, and the man's aura was terrible. Put these on now. The man dumped a big bag on his desk, looking as if the earlier exchange had never happened. Inside, he had gym clothes with your name on them. In 10 minutes, change and come meet me in the fields outside. However, regarding orientation, sir, he remembered protecting the brunette girl from the zero-pointer, and she looked astonished. Time wasted on orientation should be moved. There are just 9 minutes and 12 seconds remaining. Aizawa Shota sat there idly sipping another juice pouch while waiting for his students to descend. Though Nezu made him explain things to the pupils first, he would have preferred to carry out his standard threat of expulsion. It was merely a fright if they impressed him. Probably as a result of that youngster on the watch list, Midoriya, for which he didn't really hold Nezu accountable. The child need guidance, and if Nezu's suspicions about his past mistreatment were accurate, along with the child's fixation on heroes as his file suggested, then he would probably become a vigilante if expelled. A behavior that had repeatedly transformed a decent person into a villain. It could be a result of what they witnessed or how society viewed them after their deeds. He heard the doors open and saw them all descend at once. Some appeared anxious, some certain, and still others were just uninterested. Well, everyone arrived on schedule. You all had a brief taste of applying your eccentricities in a real-world situation during your admission examinations. Aizawa clicked his pen and got ready his result recording device. The Ministry of Education is adamant that quirks not be a part of your everyday lives outside of hero schools like UA. This is unreasonable and detrimental. Midoriya, come on over. His eyes centered on the young greenite, who appeared incredibly anxious and not at all like the fierce fighter he had just witnessed win the exam. You would have taken a number of regular fitness exams in middle school, some of which prohibited you from using your quirks. You won the practical by scoring first, Midoriya, as he pulled out a softball and tossed it to the youngster. In middle school, how far could you toss a softball? 20 meters, please. The child averted his gaze, obviously uncomfortable with his score. Aizawa wasn't sure, though, if his low score was the result of his lack of experience in the gym, his fear of what his bullies would do, or both. Okay. Repeat with your unique twist. You may do anything you want as long as you stay inside that circle, Aizawa indicated. Is that this wimp who placed first really? Mineta whispered to his peers, especially the girls. Fantastic. All he had to do was capture the arrogant pupil. There was always at least one applicant per year who believed that the quick and simple way to get laid was to be a hero. What a failure. I'll beat his scores, I wager. As he spoke, he noticed Mineta glancing at the females, perhaps wanting to impress them. Conversely, Midoriya's anxious countenance turned into a frown. Maybe something had occurred before they arrived at the pitch to cause such a reaction to occur so quickly. Recognized, Sensei. With a roar, Midoriya umed his new form, his body expanding and skin becoming darker. He wasn't abruptly nude thanks to the availability of tracksuits at UA for students with peculiar body types. The pupils, especially Mineta, who had not witnessed his peculiarity in action, were all in disbelief and were murmuring incoherently. Midoriya roared back, hurling the softball as hard as he possibly could. The distance is 42 meters. This is the difference between using your peculiarities and not, the level at which I aim to teach you as heroes, Aizawa said to the pupils as she read aloud from the gadget that recorded the throw. As I've previously stated, you're gone if I think you're not giving it your best or if you don't have what it takes. And I'll add this as a lovely little incentive. The last place finisher will clean the CL room by themselves after school for the next week. However, that is unfair, Mineta yelled out, probably already worried that he wouldn't place. It's not fair in life. Earthquakes, storms, war, villain attacks. Aizawa gazed at the now pale students, his eyes sparkling and scarf billowing menacingly. All of these things are unjust, they claim lives, and they murder innocent people. It is your duty as heroes to aid as many people as you can and to do everything within your power to counteract injustice in the world. If you find it to be too much, please stop wasting my time and resign right away. Midoriya, get back up front. Kirishima, it's your turn. The pupils completed their tests one by one, putting in every effort to finish ahead of schedule. When the results were finally added up, Mineta, you came in last and will be cleaning the CL room by yourself for the next week. Yaoyorozu, since you came in first, you will have a week off from cleaning after Mineta's sentence is over. All of the pupils nodded. Please change and pick up the syllabuses that were placed in your desks. I'll be in my office until 4 if you have any questions. You can spend the rest of the day seeing the campus and becoming familiar with its layout. But first, Mineta and Midoriya remain behind. Sensei, did you need anything? Midoriya went up to him first. The lad was thankfully not a stuttering mess, just less enraged than he had been moments before. But Mineta was giggling like a kid. Indeed. I want to be clear right now, Mineta, that you won't be in my CL for very long if you don't improve. If your sole purpose for being here is to persuade a female to spread her legs, you ought to go right away and look for another line of work. The boy with purple hair burbled, but Aizawa ignored it and sent him away, leaving Midoriya to wait patiently. And myself, sir? Midoriya prodded, his eyes revealing that his nerves were beginning to show once more. Compared to the photo in your file, which is only a year old, I've noted that you've gained a significant amount of muscle. I was curious as to how you had changed so much. Though he didn't want to ume that, Aizawa nevertheless wanted to be certain. A sludge villain attacked me a few months ago. When I used my quirk for the first time in years, I discovered it was more than just going gray, a memory that made Midoriya cringe. He was aware of so much from the children's file, but he chose not to intervene. The hero who apprehended the villain brought me to a quirk doctor to determine what had transpired, and they had an expert with an analysis quirk examine my case to determine what had truly happened. The hero who saved my life pointed out to them that my PEV healing factor would be great for training because it would allow me to exercise hard with almost any recovery time. Over the next few months, I cleaned Takoba Municipal Beach Park, using my muscles to be worked by lugging the trash to a real dump. Alright. We have real training facilities with UA, though. Get your syllabus, which includes a list of the gyms you can use and your complete student ID. Silently grateful that Nezu had foreseen and ensured Bakugo and Midoriya wouldn't have access to the same facilities, Aizawa sent the child on his way. He watched the child go and headed to the staff room, hoping to talk to Khan about the way the Bakugo child was acting. Aizawa sank onto a chair in the teacher's lounge, groaning, and inhaled deeply to appreciate the aroma of his warm cup of coffee. You absolutely appear worn out. Khan had already fallen asleep at their table when Midnight and Mike approached him with a sly smile. He is perpetually fatigued. All right, how are your homeroom brats doing? Mike laughed as the four of them sat down together. Lively. Aizawa squeezed the bridge of his nose. I also had a chance to look at everyone's records, and I'm already looking forward to the headache that the next few years will bring. By what do you mean? Mike edged his head, perplexed. As far as Aizawa knew, he had never bothered to look up a student's record. This year, there are a lot of kids on our watch list. The public relations training they will require will be a headache, even if they are not problems themselves. Aizawa took a big sip of his coffee and frowned. More than the two topics Nezu concentrated on in the entrance exam, is it right? Midnight scowled and leaned in to give the situation more serious attention, letting go of her playful demeanor. Throughout the numerous first-year courses, there are 14 students on the watch list. Aizawa noticed that his colleagues' eyes were widening as he observed them, mostly in the two hero clees, but general education and support also contain one apiece. Now, tell us everything. Mike moaned, sulkily chewing on a scone. By this point, we should probably be aware. Who's next? We already know about the boys from Bakugo and Midoriya. There is surveillance on both of the pupils I recommend. Aizawa took out their files, preparing them so he and his colleagues could prepare for the several scenarios and additional instruction that would probably be required. First, we have Momo Yaoyorozu. Her peculiarity allows her to change her lipids and construct anything she knows the atomic structure of. It's also not a one-to-one compromise because, during the evaluation exam, I witnessed her construct a whole cannon, a working electric scooter, and much more while still being able to move around. Despite her potential to cause global economic instability, she is viewed as less important because her family was already wealthy when she was born. There are worries that she may use it to recover her family's wealth in the event that they lose it, that someone might abduct her due to her unusual behavior, and that, should she ever turn evil, she might easily create an atomic bomb by eating at a buffet. Thank you. I needed that thinking, Midnight scowled. Fortunately, it appears that her family has instilled this awareness in her from an early age, so she appears to be completely aware of the implications and will probably want the least I stance with PR courses. Aizawa shared a few of the few positive things he could saw about his list. The next one is a different problem that I plan to discuss with Hound Dog when I get the chance. Son of Endeavor, Shoto Todoroki. In addition to the facial scars from his mother's alleged psychotic episode, many people have unanswered questions regarding the Todoroki family's domestic situation. That's why the government is apprehensive and keeping an eye on Todoroki, though I think the Hero Commission is more concerned with maintaining their public image in the event that the number 2 is found to have committed a crime than anything else. Yes, therapy for the child who loves candy canes. Thankfully, Mike was taking notes and demonstrating his ability to be serious when needed. Toru Hagakuri is a mutant with the ability to become invisible. She was placed on the watch list as a child because it was feared that she would exploit her oddity to steal or spy. Fortunately, hers was straightforward and should require little additional labor. Fumikage Tokiyami comes next. Although he is not problematic in and of himself, his quirk becomes more intense and violent in the presence of darkness. This quirk is not just completely sentient with its own ideas and desires. He was put on watch because it was a worry that he would ever lose control of Dark Shadow. To be honest, I think the last student in my CL will be expelled. You understand, Shota, that you shouldn't enter your lessons with the intention of dismissing the less attentive students. Mike chastised him angrily. Because his hair is comprised of sticky balls that he can remove at any time and set on surfaces where they will attach to everything that touches them for a few hours, Minoru Mineta, Aizawa, was unfazed by the reprimanding quirk that caused him to pop off. Even he recovers quickly from these. How that justifies a watchlist spot is beyond me. Khan looked tired as he raised his head from the table. Additionally, some of his CL mates who slipped me a report so as not to cause a scene said that he was trying to find or look into making a peephole into the girls' changing room. He has also been written up at his previous schools for making inappropriate comments more than once. He seems like one of those students who is only trying to become a hero so that girls will want to have with him, and his peculiarity is one that a peeping Tom might easily abuse. Oh no, I love a nice roll in the hay, but at least I take my work seriously, Midnight said with a nasty scowl. I detest students who consider this to be only a simple hookup method. Khan's CL contains the remaining heroic individuals. Aizawa cast a quick glance at the Blood King. You can probably guess which ones, right? Which ones are Bakugo, Monoma, Komori, Shishida, Kuroiro, and Kamakiri? Khan gave a nod. I made sure to check into my CL. We already know about Bakugo, but Monoma has occasionally showed signs of instability due to his inferiority and superiority complexes, raising questions about his mental health. The authorities was concerned about Komori's ability to induce hallucinogenic mushrooms to grow from her body. Shishida's transformation causes him to become more ferocious and beastly in thought, but since he has already demonstrated an amazing level of self-control, I believe that a few more lessons with Hound Dog would be beneficial. Kuroiro has the ability to enter dark spaces and control objects that are black, but because of his dishonest demeanor and peculiarity, his former schools kept an eye on him. Lastly, Kamakiri is a violent fighter that resembles Bakugo but not to the same extent. He also has the ability to sprout strong, long-lasting, and Meve blades from his body. Everything is true. Aizawa nodded, seeing that Mike and Midnight were starting to have a headache from the amount of labor that was ahead of them. The last two, I fear, aren't easy either. Hitoshi Shinso, one of them, is enrolled in general education but has expressed a desire to be in the hero course. He possesses a strange ability known as brainwashing, which allows him to do anything he wants as long as it doesn't require a lot of thought on the side of the person if he asks them a question and they respond. He was placed on a watch list by his former schools, who even publicly humiliated him by calling him a villain. I have already submitted Nezu a report so he may handle that school, along with his general ed homeroom teacher. This implied that the small rat would also stop bothering him for a while. And I believe you mentioned I stance last? When Mike had finished writing the details for the Shinso child, he looked up. Yes, a single Mei Hatsume. She is an intelligent inventor, but she also shows no consideration for anyone's feelings or opinions, or even what she is or isn't allowed to do. She has set off explosions in her makeshift lab at home, and there are countless police reports to prove it. There are worries that she might have researched or made illicit goods out of curiosity or boredom. According to Powerloader, she's already trying to arrange a takeover of the sports festival so that it serves as one large billboard promoting her innovations. She is aware that the primary purpose of the sports festival is to showcase the hero course students to prospective mentors and the general public, correct? Midnight arched an eyebrow, saying, they have a cultural festival later in the year, but we allowed them to have some gear to show off. She is aware, but she is indifferent. When Aizawa finished his coffee, he groaned, wanting more right away. Lovely, one of those. We have a lot of planning ahead of us, so drink up, everyone, Khan growled as he carried the whole pot around. Nezu, we appreciate everyone's attendance. Nezu grinned and ordered All Might to pour 5 hot cups of tea. Gran Torino, Sir Night-Eye, Recovery Girl, number 1, and himself were currently occupying the office. I'm sure you all understand why we are here, don't you? Yeah, All Might has at last produced a list of potential successors. Gran Torino studied the quivering superhero, delighting Nezu with the blonde's continued fear of his former instructor. Yes, I did. Might made an effort to appear irred as he laid the list on the table. Sadly, I couldn't discover any second-year standouts, so the only choices available are from the first and third years. I still maintain that Mirio ought to receive it. Picking up a copy of the list, Sir Night-Eye scowled and said, he's perfect to inherit your legacy. Boy, that's not your decision. Now shut up. Gran took a copy and went through it. Nezu's voice was strained as he described some of the options. All Might, he said, please provide an explanation. Candidates were selected based on their heroic aspirations and current demeanor, or if they had a unique quality that I believed would fit in nicely with One for All. With the right support, candidates may still adopt the correct mindset. As Nezu reviewed the candidates, All Might conceded. Najire Hado and Mirio Tagata, both third years, were listed, but the third member of the Big Three was oddly missing. Izuku Midoriya, Tenya Iida, Eijiro Kirishima, Fumikage Tokiyami, Shoto Todoroki, Itsuka Kendo, Katsuki Bakugo, Denki Kaminari, Tagaru Kamakiri, Nirengeki Shota, Tetsu, Pony Tsunodori, Nato Monoma, Reiko Yanagi, Abara Shiozaki, and Hitoshi Shinso were among those on the list from the first few years. 7 watch list members and nearly half of the first-year hero students were candidates, as was one general education student. Why isn't Imajiki, Mirio's friend, on this site? At the list, Sir Night-Eye scowled in bewilderment. Even though I've only seen the youngster once, I can already tell that bringing up the possibility of his emerging as the next peace symbol will likely cause him to have a nervous breakdown. All Might made a joke. He is not incorrect. The staff was well aware of the boy's nerves, and the recovery girl moaned. Still, this gives us nearly 20 choices. How would you like to deal with this? Gran Torino went over the list, looking at each one. To be honest, I thought of that. When All Might said, I was thinking that I could easily inspect our 2 third-year candidates by myself when I help with their CL given it's just those 2, He seemed immensely proud of himself. However, there are a lot of freshmen. Therefore, I had the idea that we should invite other professional heroes to speak as guest lecturers to the hero course participants and prospective students. I could even invite Tsukachi to present a lecture on the cooperative relationship between law enforcement and heroes. This would enable several individuals we can trust to view the children in different settings. That's quite astute. Is it indeed Toshinori there? Gran arched an eyebrow in response to All Might retreating to the corner to pout. Apart from perfectly valid questions, Nezu grinned, sensing that All Might's pouting would only intensify. That is a really good idea. Even people who aren't on this list would profit from it. Could you be prepared to provide such a lecture first, Sir Night Eye? I think I could set up some time after the Klees return from their USJ trips. I'll be ready with one. The pro said that while the group split off to plot and organize, All Might remained, sadly pouting in the corner. Izuku picked up his packet and started to go through the syllabus, quickly scanning it for the rules he would need to know, the schedule for the CL, and the kinds of facilities he would be using. Exercise A. At last, Izuku discovers the training facilities he may utilize, including unusual training field B. You also attend Gym A, dude? As he turned to find his CL mate with spiky red hair standing next to the girl who was completely pink and both of them going through their packages. Same, an animated voice asked loudly from behind. I think we should go lift together. I need a workout partner. I have Gym C, boo. The pink girl scowled and puffed out her cheeks. Apologies, Mina. The redhead embered laughed. Maybe you can make some new friends in Gym C. I know you want a pink buddy, but you stated I'm your horn buddy, or a companion for the eyes. How come? With a blink of astonishment at their bizarre talk, Izuku turned back to face him when the two of them suddenly recalled his existence. I apologize. Mina stated that my hair looked like horns when I had it styled like this, therefore I was her horn friend. FYI. My name is Eijiro Kirishima. The redhead, as he was now called, poked a thumb into his own chest. My name is Mina Ishido. Izuku swallowed and took a step back when the vivacious pinkhead approached him to examine him closely. His nerves began to fray again. I proclaim you potential fluffy buddy. Mina gestured upward, then turned to face Kirishima Kiri. Your task is to S him for friendship potential. Fluffy, what a buddy. Izuku's voice sounded strained, and he found the entire talk strange. Nonsense. Mina gave her hair a little touch and then gestured to Fluff, his own hair. Consequently, possible fluffy friend. I'm going to go check out Gym C now. I'm not sure how much you guys miss me. Mina gives a wave and walks away. I apologize for that. Kirishima laughed clumsily, saying, Mina is, well, Mina. In any case, I really meant to go to the gym with you. You seem like you know what you're doing with weights, and I need a competent gym companion. I mean, not really. Izuku acknowledged, his nerves clearly apparent as he'd eventually recovered from the state he'd fallen into dealing with Minetta's remarks, both in the testing environment and in the locker room. Also, he remembered that he ate a guy from the entrance exam and how he'd handled Izuku. How? Kirishima gaped even as Izuku began walking towards Gym A, recalling that they had petted on their way to his CL room earlier in the day. But you're ripped, dude. I've never really utilized a gym. I simply did some community service moving some trash. Izuku shyly averted her gaze. Then all I'll have to do is demonstrate what to do. After giving a nod, Kirishima pushed Izuku to move more quickly. They arrived at Gym A, where he noticed two other individuals wearing first-year gym uniforms, whom he UMed to be CL1B students who had received the same gym IGN meant. The first was a man with steely gray hair and pointy teeth, just like Kirishima. The second one was a pretty female with soft-colored hair that was light gray. That was all Izuku could see until Kirishima lured him over to a bench press. Alright, Midori bro, how much weight are you capable of lifting in either position? Not really, I guess. Izuku was never really able to observe how much weight he was able to lift. Then, let's begin with your base form and proceed accordingly. Kirishima nodded, then began tapping his foot with crossed arms whenever Midoriya didn't lay down. Midoriya, wincing, fell to his knees and noted that the bench might even accommodate him in a transformed state. Okay, now please slide the bar in this direction. Kirishima showed us how to do it correctly. I'll increase the weight with each movement until we figure out where it starts to hurt you, okay? Alright. So? The redhead grinned and hardened his arms from the elbow down, saying, moving the weights will at least get me warmed up. Izuku didn't have the strength to refuse Kirishima's enthusiasm. How absurd. Izuku and Kirishima heard the other guy's voice in the room and turned to see the 1B gym patrons staring at them. To be more precise, the male was staring at Kirishima while the girl was staring at Izuku and making him flush profusely. What's the issue? Kirishima questioned in confusion as the other adolescent with pointed teeth charged over. I love hardening things. The 1B member gazed at the rock like Kirishima, his skin turning suddenly to dazzling metal. No, that's just my preference. Kirishima and his adversary got into a heated argument and argued, forgetting about Izuku's training. The attractive girl with the gray hair hovered over them, studying their quarreling CL mates with her head. It appears that in addition to your odd similarities, a pretty startling coincidence, there's another issue to which one should pay sufficient attention. One that would hopefully replace the petty arguments that are keeping you occupied in both thinking and action with a joyful sense of connecting to your most adored personalities, who you both appear to be capable of, if not quite same in terms of appearance. The girl looked at the now dumbfounded, stiffening pair and spoke in a mild, almost flat tone. Kirishima started, What? His colleague concluded the perplexing query. It's strange that you two have such similar eccentricities, she added, but you should be appreciating the fact that you share a connection with some well-known individuals, which may be a great way to bond. Izuku summarized with ease as the first base pair stared at him in shock, the cute girl giving him a faint smile as he reddened. What characters, you ask? With a bewildered expression on his face, Kirishima heard the other boy mumble, how did he comprehend her so easily? To put it bluntly, the girl turned to face her CL mate Kakuna and pointed to Kirishima Metapod. Izuku tried, really tried, but when he saw that description and the two boys' wide-eyed looks, he was unable to contain his amusement, which burst into full-fledged laughter at their outraged expressions. I apologize again. Izuku scratched the back of his head and said, besides, your peculiarities are so different anyhow, as his eyes darted over his own altered states. What just happened? How did Kirishima gaze at his calcified arms? How even are you able to tell? Izuku straightened his back and sat up, excited to discuss his peculiarities. However, during our quirk evaluation exam, I saw that you only ever toughened the necessary portions of yourself and that you usually felt more exhausted afterward than the exercise should have. I deduced that your transformations require stamina because you showed me that you can harden your entire body when you tripped and wanted to prevent getting wounded. Furthermore, I can attest that you have the ability to modify the degree of hardness your quirk offers, having witnessed you harden various areas to varying degrees both back then and now. Izuku, on the other hand, turned to face the 1B guy, whose name he was still unaware of, and saw that you had transformed your complete body at once and didn't seem to be concerned by it. That indicates to me that either you've trained it to the point where a stamina drain is irrelevant. I doubt you would have had time to do so if you were just starting your first year, or yours has a different energy cost. Yes, I suppose. The perplexed first baseman let go of his quirk. My diet's iron provides the energy for my quirk, which increases my body's innate strength and durability. All you would then need to do is modify your diet to include more iron and carry iron supplement pills. You could even ask the support course or the school medical staff to prepare special, quickly acting pills for you, and you could maintain that for a very long time. Izuku quickly took his notepad out of his bag and began writing down ideas and notes. Additionally, if this type of exercise increases your strength, the benefits will be amplified. Not to mention using that form while training to develop speed while carrying a larger body weight would be beneficial. Thank God. Gaping at his own hands, the metal quirk user turned back to Kirishima. It would be more sensible to concentrate on your endurance and how strong your quirk may be for you. Continually pushing through obstacles and making them work harder will help you become used to using it when you reach new thresholds. You are one terrifying intelligent guy, Midori bro. As Kirishima and his somewhat identical twin gazed at him, Izuku blushed and averted his gaze, hastily placing his notepad back into his backpack. I apologize. I see that people find my muttering and oddball nerding disturbing. He winced, praying that he wouldn't ruin his one and only opportunity to start a new school and school year free of the stigma that Bakugo and his former CL mates had placed on him. That was fantastic, buddy, what are you talking about? You broke it down like that, Kirishima argued, pulling out the notepad to place it in Izuku's hands once more. I never really gave it much thought myself, but the redhead grinned broadly and snapped his fingers. I also never gave the iron supplements much thought. The other user with the hardening quirk nodded. Her name is Tetsu, by the way. If we are going to start introductions in between our clees, my name is Reiko Yanagi. It's a genuine joy to meet you. I too find it quite intriguing how you can analyze and deconstruct our peculiarities on a cerebral level, and I would be very grateful if you could do the same for me. Not only would I like to know what conclusions you would draw, but I would also like to know how you would help me enhance my own worth and capabilities as a hero. I do find myself seriously wondering if this is a peculiarity of yours, the capacity to recognize another person's gifts instantly. If so, combined with the rest of your logical reasoning, that kind of in-depth insight would make you a renowned detective oddity. Reiko, the cute girl, spoke out, tilting her head slightly as Tetsu and Kirishima appeared perplexed by her remarks, but he didn't understand why, since they sounded simple to him. I am not that weird. Not wanting to scare away these two already, he winced as he thought back to how many of his CL mates had appeared scared when they saw his angry countenance coupled with his changed state. But what is your quirk? It was safe to discuss other people's eccentricities. As Reiko started to float again, she told him about her quirk, which she called Poltergeist, which gives her telekinetic abilities. I have complete telekinetic control over anything I want, and the human weight limit is currently in effect. An oddity of telekinetics. Izuku sat up, saying, my mom also has one. And total command? With that, you can accomplish so much? Your weight limit, the speed at which you can move objects under your control, and accuracy would be the areas on which you should concentrate your training. It's simple to work on weight and speed, just train it like a muscle. Take up larger weights, move them more quickly, and strive to surp your personal bests. He paused for control, thinking, I guess, grabbing like a tub of sand and trying to construct little sculptures out of it. The sand particles should be so light that they won't interfere with your weight limit and will allow you to become accustomed to trying to control multiple objects at once. An additional choice would be to try using your oddity to sketch or take notes. This way, you can focus on one thing at a moment and execute it really precisely. I appreciate your analysis and recommendations. Reiko grinned at him. I must ask, though, we haven't heard your name or quirk yet. I had already thought about working with heavier objects to further improve the limit that limits my ability to use my quirk, but the exercises to further improve my control and speed were concepts I hadn't yet considered. Well, that's enough for now. My name is Izuku Midoriya, and my peculiarity? He maged the back of his head as he changed, his complexion darkening and body expanding, the nubs that he was certain were growing into spikes partially pushing out of his clothing. He witnessed Kirishima grinning at a stunned Tetsu, while Reiko appeared enthralled with his more hideous appearance. That's really masculine, dude. What happens when Tetsu starts prodding one of the developing spikes on Izuku's elbow? He saw Kirishima observing him as he spoke. Dude, you looked so different when you first came to CL this morning, when you were taking Aizawa's tests, and now. Why is that? Tetsu and Reiko appeared perplexed but intrigued as Kirishima, who was known for being extremely frank at times, questioned him. I'm not good around people. Izuku acknowledged that I wasn't as anxious as usual because Mineta and Iida annoyed me sufficiently. I understand that his remark during the ball through was a bit of a move, but to that extent? Kirishima edged his head, perplexed. What had Iida done? Mineta and I were the last ones out of the dressing rooms. I heard him muttering about how to construct a peephole if there wasn't one already there while searching for one in the girls' locker rooms. When Iida returned to investigate why it was taking so long, he quickly concluded that I must have been herring Mineta and began to pick on me while Mineta seized the opportunity to run. I challenged him about it. His fellow hero pupils appeared displeased with the narrative. Very unmanly. Kirishima furrowed her brow. The two of them. Tetsu concurred. Such impolite fools, to so readily fall victim to vulgar paean and let pride keep them from seeing the truth or even from thinking there was more to what their own eyes saw. With a faint grimace on her countenance, Reiko expressed her somewhat voluminous viewpoint on the subject. Thank you, everyone. Izuku couldn't express to them how much their uncomplicated support meant to him, but they appeared to understand, even though they weren't aware of the cause. I can't take any more of this heavy garbage. Tetsu gave himself a shake and said, "Lead like it's a gym and get our training done. If you're that fit, Midoriya, I need to know what your routine is." "I spent several months moving trash only." With a quick shake of his head, Izuku said, "I don't know proper exercise forms." "You just shifted some trash?" Tetsu appeared completely perplexed by that. "Yes, I discovered my quirk was what it was when I was attacked by a sludge villain a few months ago. By then, I hadn't changed from the first time I'd understood it. The water hose team saved my life from that villain and led me to a quirk specialist who determined what my quirk could do." He glanced aside, embered. "It was they who recommended the workout to strengthen my body because of my healing factor and who even directed me to Tokoa Municipal Beach." "You're the one who did the cleanup there, right?" With a masculine smile, Tetsu said. "Okay, students. You've done well enough this week, but today's heroics period is going to be a little different." Aizawa sighed, his signature exhaustion evident. And he thanked whatever god there was for making it Friday so he could take a little vacation from these youngsters. "On Monday, you had to study for my test, and from Tuesday to Thursday, your heroics class covered hero law and other more theoretical subjects. However, you'll be working on a useful task today." He approached a chalkboard and turned it over to reveal blustery lines announcing that today would be a war trial. Present Mike had made him do this because of a lost wager. "Battle trials? BB trials? Already?" Mineta gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. Aizawa glared at the frightened lad and put an end to the perverse student's blubbering. The boy's attempt to create a peephole prior to Aizawa's order that he hadn't already sent him packing was all that mattered. However, the CL was paying attention to the tension that existed between Mineta and Iida on the one hand, and the triad of Kirishima, Ashido, and Midoriya on the other. It had come as more than a little surprise when the amiable pair of Kirishima and Ashido attacked Iida on Tuesday before CL, accusing her of making snap judgments and supporting a spy. Indeed, combat trials. This morning, CL-1B completed theirs. Aizawa looked around, searching for any indication in his students' eyes that they had internalized the ridiculous CLA-B rivalry that Khan had claimed a few of his own had taken very seriously. It makes sense. There are only so many teachers, and morning classes are when we do our non-heroic coursework. Ashido, Kirishima, and Midoriya mumbled to each other after the three of them had changed desks together. The request was granted as long as they continued to work and behaved properly in CL. "Enough. Move to Gamma's training field. You have 15 minutes to get there, please." Aizawa gave the command before any more discussion or theorizing could occur. "I'll go into further detail there with your other instructor. First though, they were in for you. The first versions of your hero costumes have arrived." Bearing a push of a button, 20 suitcases bearing numbers that corresponded to deck placement slid out of the wall. "Remember that during your stay here, you are expected to determine which of these works and which doesn't. Send any requests, inquiries, or changes you may have to the support team." Afterwards, he proceeded to the Field Gamma observation room, with his tablet displaying the tracking beacons embedded in the hero suits of CL-1A, a requirement he had made clear to every pupil he instructed, in order to ensure that no young fools took them off campus to flaunt their status and to east in keeping an eye on them in perilous situations. "Hi there, Aizawa." He walked inside the chamber and was greeted by the weary voice of the genuine form of the symbol of peace, his costume sagging off a gaunt skeleton frame. "Coffee?" Accepting the provided cup, he gave the man a nod, acknowledging that while he did not share All Might's enthusiasm for performing for the cameras, he did appreciate that the man was committed to being a teacher. "The is expected to arrive in 15 minutes. Aizawa informed him while watching the tablet to see if any of the pupils shown exceptional speed, even if others would arrive in 10 minutes. "I'll be prepared." All Might nodded and made sure the pupils were placed where they should have been by using the help robots that UA had given them. Before long, the 20 would-be heroes were waiting for instructions in the observation room. To fully capitalize on their eccentricities, a few of them, like Kaminari and Aoyama, had useful clothes. Certain characters, like Hagakure and Yaoyorozu, had costumes that required significant adjustments in order to allow them to showcase their eccentricities without creating a PR disaster. Some, like Ashido and Kirishima, were only decorative and could be expanded upon. Then there was Midoriya, who was merely sporting a pair of tattered-looking trousers, and Mineta, who appeared to be wearing a nappy. Observing the boy's irritated demeanor, He surmised that perhaps he had misplaced a piece of his top when he turned in the rest. However, the annoyance appeared to be conflicting with fear, as the boy's friends teased him in different ways and several of his female CL mates continued to shoot him looks. Okay, students, pay attention. They were all standing at attention when Aizawa interrupted any whispers or casual conversation with, "Today we'll be doing group battle trials. There will be 8 teams. There will be 4 2-person teams and 4 3-person teams among them. For all 4 matchups, the 2-person teams will be the villains, giving them more time to prepare. The 3-person teams won't know who their adversaries or allies are or even the specifics of their trial until the all clear to go, at which point they will emerge victorious." "This seems really unfair and weird, sir." Iida interrupted the quiet, slicing the air with vigor as she heard how the activity was described. "Not really." Midoriya interrupted him before he had a chance to say anything, and it does match reality. In this industry, villains usually take the initiative since, as heroes, we are only able to act in reaction to crimes committed by others, whether they are imminent or involve following a known criminal. Furthermore, villains tend to stick with small groups they know they can trust because they are hard to come by in larger groupings where they frequently turn on one another. However, heroes frequently collaborate with strangers out of need, putting their trust in them just because they are fellow heroes. Furthermore, it fits the fact that an emergency can usually dispatch as many heroes as are available. "Mr. Aizawa, did I miss anything?" "No," Midoriya said it quite nicely, "there are 20 robots here." He nodded to the analytical lad, silently reminding him to find a skilled analyst or strategist to help him further develop that skill. They will direct you to your waiting area and are all numbered the same as the number on the case of your superhero costume. Heroes, after you're in your waiting area, the doors will close and won't open until it's time for you to begin. If you're a villain, they'll transport you to a building where your partner will be as well as an explanation of what your trial scenario is. You'll have 5 minutes from then on to find the villain's building and reunite with your teammates. The timer for 10 minutes will begin to run after those 5 are up or one of you enters the building. The bad guys win if that window of time expires and you haven't finished your trial's win parameter. A roll of capture tape will also be given to each of you, which you can use to eliminate an opponent and take them out of the trial. After one group has completed theirs, we will continue on to the next, and so on, until all of the students have left. At that time, we will gather back in the CL room to view the recordings and assess each student's performance. All Might instantly reverted to his skeletal form as soon as the pupils left. Now, follow your robots and amaze me. All right, this ought to be fascinating. With a grumble, All Might examined the screen that displayed the randomizer that the robots were using to guide the pupils down different routes while keeping their whereabouts a secret from others. Consider it to be an issue? Hopefully not. When Aizawa saw that Mineta, Iida, and Kaminari were pitted against Midoriya and Shoji in the opening round, she sighed. Izuku defending a bomb. As they investigated the area they had been directed to, a 5-story concrete building with a respectable view of the training field surrounding them, his partner Shoji pondered aloud. "I have to confess, though, that I'm shocked by the cliché. It's only the first day." Izuku shrugged. "We should prepare, but I didn't think the IRST combat test would be that tough. Apart than having additional arms, what else can your quirk do? At the tips of my tentacles, I may form a variety of appendages. Whether they be hands, eyes, mouths, ears, or more tentacles, which can also have an attachment." Shoji explained everything to him. "I found that it was really helpful in identifying and locating groups of robots to take out during the entrance exam." "Could you distinguish things that clearly?" Izuku's eyes narrowed as he began to see clearly. "I believe I know how to win this easily. Do you believe you can name the nearest hero to us after they are released from captivity? I've got a scheme." Izuku grinned ferociously, his eyes brightening as his scheme took shape in his brain. "Ida, where is our third individual, man?" When the announcement to start came, Mineta leapt out, her eyes darting wildly as they inched their way towards the tall building they were instructed to go to. "I'm not sure." Iida scowled and peered around as he adjusted to the weight of his armor, which, given that the armor was primarily for show, wasn't as heavy as it could have been. All they were informed when the all clear to start was that they had to locate and touch a bomb within the structure in the allotted 10 minutes. Not even the identities of the villains or their allies were revealed to them. Aizawa draws attention to the fact that not all messages provided all the information needed. It's Yayorozu, hopefully. Mineta chuckled a little. I'm sure she'd be a great, et. He heard footsteps and turned to see Midoriya sprinting to catch up. Sorry, I was a bit further away than intended. Before he could correct the lad for his blatantly incorrect inference, he heard footsteps. Midoriya said he was sorry as they caught up. How come? I really wanted one of the girls, damn it. When Midoriya gave the child a gaze that caused the boy with the grape theme to weep and duck behind Iida, Mineta muttered. Midoriya, please stop harrying your peers. Midoriya scoffed and rolled his eyes as he chastised. Well, at least we have a plan. Izuku seemed to be attempting to come up with some kind of plan as he cast a quick glance in the direction of the building they were about to visit. When we find the bomb, I was going to hurry it by using my speed to start exploring the floors from the bottom up. Mineta has to climb to the top of the structure and descend. As a diversion, Iida began to go over their previous plan, or, more precisely, his. That strategy is sound. Midoriya nodded and extended a courteous hand, simple but powerful. More out of reaction than anything else, Iida reached out to grab his partner's hand and gasped when the Greenite wrapped capture tape around his wrist with it. But mine is better. How absurd! Mineta shrieked in surprise as Midoriya lunged forward to grab their small CL mate, preventing him from evading the capture tape. The villainous gang triumphs as heroes are captured. Iida gaped as Aizawa's voice reverberated across the pitch, his thoughts at last beginning to catch up. However, you were among the heroes, Iida exclaimed, startled. No, Shoji and I were the bad guys, and we took advantage of his oddity to determine who was closest. The same manner I took out the two of you. I went and took Kaminari's position. Izuku shrugged, realizing that a villain is expected to employ cunning strategies in order to prevail. First team, kindly head back to the locker room to remove your costumes. Then head back to the CL room to await our arrival. Izuku promptly followed Aizawa's instructions and went to do as he was told, leaving Iida furious. With his hero costume case positioned next to the desk, Izuku leaned back in his chair. Was there anything you needed to alter back before I arrived? I want my eye candy, Mina growled at him as she and Kirishima sat next to him, their group coming in second. Kirishima's abs are yours. Izuku gave a snort and threw a balled-up piece of paper at Mina, causing it to bounce off her forehead. Oh no. Mina gave me a brotherly Kiri face. Ick. I'm not going there, so it's your responsibility, fluffy buddy, to give me eye candy so I can continue to be your alien queen. Do you think she'll also harm Tetsu in this way? Izuku questioned Kirishima while assiduously avoiding their blustery female companion. Most likely. The redhead without a shirt laughed, but that could be because she's been excited to see Yanagi and Tetsu for the entire week. They mentioned bringing Tetsu's old acquaintance to the karaoke bar, but didn't they? Izuku scowled as he thought back to their previous day's conversation with their 1B buddies in the gym. Yes, indeed. Mina suddenly stops sulking, and Kirishima agrees. That'll be okay. However, before Kirishima can say anything more, the door opens, revealing Mr. Aizawa and the final group, All Might, trailing behind. Okay. Everyone, this is how it will operate. The last team was sent to their seats by their exhausted homeroom instructor, who then motioned to the board, saying, we'll watch the footage for each fight. No one is allowed to speak during those viewings. Aizawa's scowl made it obvious that this was not something to put him to the test. After that, I'll take any opening questions before having both sides justify their positions. I'll then provide my own analysis alongside All Might, and we'll be open to criticism from all of you. Having said that, watch the video from the starting squad. It didn't take long to complete the video. It showed Izuku and Shoji arranging things, the three heroes heading out of their starting locations for the bunkers, Izuku eliminating Kaminari, and Iida meeting up with Mineta before Izuku eliminated them both. He was confident that the first round had gone the fastest because of how quickly the other teams had arrived. And so it begins. Everyone might laugh heartily. Alright, CL mates, do you have any queries or remarks before the teams present their work? Respected sir. I believe like Midoriya and his partner should be punished for going against the spirit of the exercise as well as the rules since Iida leapt to his feet, one hand raised high and the other chopping mechanically at the air. Interesting. Aizawa sighed. Midoriya, do you have any defense to offer? To put it simply, I never broke any of the rules that were assigned to us. Izuku's companions were by his side, supporting him in maintaining his composure, and he felt his eyebrow twitch irritably at Iida harping on him once more. Heroes who blindly trust somebody merely because they're wearing a cape run the risk of being exploited. Young Midoriya, could you please elaborate on that? With a grimace, All Might, the epitome of a hero, realized that not everyone believed that trusting heroes was a terrible thing. Well, not unless they were anarchists or villains. Just in Japan, there are hundreds of heroes. At least some villains have been heroes or sidekicks at some point, Izuku shrugged. It makes natural that a hero or sidekick would prepare their reveal, if they intended to become villains. Not only that, but there's always room for those who pretend to be heroes when they aren't. It's impossible to remember every hero in Japan without a memory quirk. Let alone when someone arrives claiming to be an international hero. And then there are some with peculiarities related to illusion, shape-shifting, perception alteration, and mind control. Similar to the Golden Sun event that Mr. Aizawa dealt with a few years prior. The what, exactly? At least the lighting quirk user had handled his loss better than the rest of that hero team, as Kaminari scowled in uncertainty. A big bad catastrophe that happened in Germany a few years ago. Aizawa gave him a quick glance, perhaps astonished that Izuku had even heard of it. A villain was long-term planning his reveal and putting everything up. He had a mind-controlling quirk that allowed him to infect someone and control them until the trigger was triggered, at which point they would blindly obey him. This villain spent months infiltrating as many heroes as he could in the region where he was situated and establishing a covert cult. Those who were not infected were unprepared for their comrade's surprise attack when he moved and heroes began to arrive to stop him. I was brought in because I could negate peculiarities. It surprises me that you are aware of that, Midoriya. Sir, I'm a quirk nerd. Examining and dissecting them. Figuring out how to combat or enhance them. I've been doing it ever since I was old enough to comprehend what a quirk was. As the CL mumbled about the explanation in the scenario, Izuku nodded to him. Knowing that people trusted in that way made it seem like a decent idea. In addition, I was aware that, should the pretense fail, my peculiarity would provide me a good opportunity of escape, with Shoji remaining near the device as a safety measure. I felt more confident when Shoji discovered who our opponents were because I knew Mineta would find a way to use Iida, and Iida would follow the rules. I understand. Aizawa nodded, acknowledging that you were correct. During UA, I hope we can resolve this issue for everyone. All of you should hope for the best but be ready for the worst. Aizawa looked about, but his eyes seemed to stay on Izuku and the back of Iida's seat. Just so you know, that same technique won't be permitted in subsequent exercises because the goal is to practice handling other situations. Do we understand each other? Indeed, sir. With nothing further to say from Iida and his comrades and virtually little for the CL to break down, Izuku settled back as the next video began. The second battle pitted Mina and Kirishima against Sato, Hagakure, and Aoyama as villains. Kirishima's peculiarity led him to rip apart rubble for projectiles, while Mina's acid destroyed any steps the heroes could ascend. His comrades had made the most of their time. Ultimately, those weren't necessary because none of the hero squad could go from one story to another without the use of the stairs, and Kirishima's storm of hurled pebbles thwarted their one attempt to raise a single person. Okay, let's get started. What was your plan going in, heroes? We were going to stick together. Sato sighed. We reasoned that while Hagakure used the chaos to get to the bomb, Aoyama and I could draw attention and keep the bad guys at bay. We didn't believe they could, or would, ruin a path we could take. And villains, I see? Mina and Kirishima turned to smile at All Might. We owe it all to Izu bro. Kirishima gave him a firm backslap. I never would have considered using my oddity to create projectiles in the past. Plus, it allowed me to comfortably grab the jagged edges. We even had plans for me to battle my way back up if needed, as my stiffened fingers become extremely sharp and can function as climbing equipment. Furthermore, I never would have considered using my acid to demolish paths of travel or lay traps. Mina acknowledges that my only thoughts were to slide on it or toss it about. Izuku even came up with some fantastic suggestions for support equipment that would help me aim, store, and use my acid more skillfully. Izuku simply shrugged at his friend's shocked expressions, saying, like I said, I'm a quirk nerd. I've been honing my analysis skills for years. Do you have any recommendations for either group? When Izuku raises his hand, most of his CL mates frown, unable to come up with anything to do. Aizawa looks about. Other actions that Mina and Kirishima could have taken included using acid to demolish a portion of the surrounding level, making the bomb more difficult to reach in the event that the enemy team managed to climb the floors, or even getting it onto the roof. Finding an acidic concentration that would damage skin but not Kirishima's hardened form would be another suggestion. Kirishima would then travel to the ground floor and fight, with Mina dousing her opponents in acid through melted holes in the floor to support her and cause havoc among the heroes. Regarding the heroes, I witnessed Sato yesterday increasing his strength and Aoyama using his powerful laser to propel himself. They could have had Aoyama utilize his peculiarity to propel himself upward, or Sato fling the others into the air. Or they could have even destroyed a portion of the roof to create an unobserved second entrance. Izuku tuned out most of the surroundings as he went through various scenarios in his head, his eyes darting around and fingers tapping his thumb quickly. You also placed few limitations, so one possibility would be to have the heroes enter the building next to the one holding the bomb and leap from one roof to the next or through a window that they could have broken first. Yes, indeed. Thank you, Midoriya. All Might coughed, waking Izuku from his hyper-focused state. Izuku turned to look around and noticed his students' wide-eyed, mouth-opening reactions to his quick burst of knowledge. The only people who weren't at least gawking were his friends, who had already witnessed it, and Todoroki, who didn't appear to care. Since Hagakuri's outfit was arranged for body language, he figured she was doing the same. As the antagonists against Todoroki, Yaoyorozu, and Kendo, the third team consisted of Jiro and Tokiyami. Jiro was able to use her vibrations to break the ice around her feet and launch an attack, and Todoroki was caught off guard when Dark Shadow could still attack him because he had frozen the building and entered before the other heroes had even arrived. It was a pretty close call, but the heroes prevailed nonetheless. The primary concern raised, Izuku didn't even have to bring it up, was Todoroki's dismal performance in terms of teamwork. A declaration with which the ice user appeared dissatisfied. The final round pitted Ojiro and Koda as the villains against Shiro, Asui, and Uraraka as the heroes was fascinating to watch because of how much mobility the hero team possessed. In contrast, the villains relied mostly on strength because Koda's quirk required animals to function and Ojiro only had his tail and no support gear. With what little they possessed, the two villains were unable to match the superior numbers and agility. The only recommendation Izuku gave, and what others also said, was that Koda should consider getting permissions for animal sidekicks, and Ojiro should get some support gear. This time around, the hero squad hadn't faced enough opposition to warrant a serious criticism. That concludes our day. Aizawa nodded, saying, by Monday, I'll have your grades from today ready. Speaking of which, be ready for your hero period. On Monday, there will be quirky sparring in CL. I want you all to be able to carry on even in the absence of a quirk. Dismissed. Lovely. Mina leapt to her feet and clasped Kirishima's and his arms together. Come on boys, we have work to do. Is this the correct location? As the group arrived at the karaoke club that Tetsu had directed them to, Mina inquired while bouncing around. It seemed that the steel quirk user and his boyhood buddy Tokage frequented this particular establishment. Yes, I'm fairly certain. To double-check it, Kirishima took out the slip of paper containing the address. Hey guys. This way about, from a back booth, waving them over, came the ever-vigorous voice of Kirishima's long-lost twin, a fact that no one could persuade Izuku wasn't genuine. Hey Yanagi, hey Tetsu. Izuku nodded to the Greeneat who was with his gym pals and grinned. When he saw them, Greeneat smirked and said, you guys didn't tell me your new friend was a greenie. Tetsu, are you trying to take my place? Tried for years to do so. Tetsu scowled at his pal. You always seem to find me again and slap me upside the head like a boomerang. That made Reiko giggle with laughter, which unfortunately resulted in Tokage focusing on her while Izuku, Kirishima, and Mina slid into the corner booth. Hey, Yanagi, don't you're off the hook either. Poking the ghost girl in the chest with a sly smile, Tokage said, don't tell me that your new friends are a couple of hot guys. She stopped to give him and Kirishima a sharp look. What's the matter, Yanagi? How could you abandon a girl? Would you have preferred to keep these two to yourself? A dango bun shot off a skewer on their table, shoving itself into Tokage's mouth and gagged her, ending any more playful remarks. God, it's Mina again. Kirishima turned pale. Run, Midori bro. They're both present. Hi there, Mina scowled, not very polite. Striking Kirishima and Izuku on the head with a menu, she then directed her attention to Tokage, who was occupied with chewing on the dango gag. We'll converse later, discussing how to make our males squirm and other related topics. Actually, there are two of them. Tetsu grew pale. This was a bad plan. At the very least, you two should have been able to predict the conclusion that has transpired, regardless of the original intentions of the other members of this group. Given how clearly the two grizzled heroes' parallels can be seen, one would think that their old acquaintances would also exhibit similar traits and carry on the yin to yang pattern. It is not the universe's fault. Rather, it is your own fault for not listening to and inquiring of one another about who was to be brought so that beforehand plans and preparations could be made and you would not give them the upper hand that they have so quickly taken from you. Yanagi took a cly sip from a bottle of Pepsi and announced in all seriousness. Well, what? The remaining four gagged, with Tetsu and Kirishima turning to Izuku for interpretation. You two are morons for not realizing that your best buddies might be similar to you if you were so similar. Even if you didn't want to rely on planning ahead, you could have inquired about Mina and Tokage's backgrounds in order to make plans that would prevent them from taking charge of the situation, as Izuku translated while rolling his eyes. You're both in trouble now that they have. Hey. While Mina and Tokage happily chuckle, Kirishima and Tetsu pout and sulk. Is it only them, fluffy buddy? Mina moved over to him, resting her chin on her hands and grinning maliciously as Tokage imitated her posture. Are you trying to tell me that you're not as screwed as well? I'm not as easy as the two. Izuku spoke while maintaining a perfect deadpan while Tetsu froze, gaping, and Kirishima choked on his drink. Bro Midori. Kirishima pouted, appearing completely deceived. I thought you were meant to be the kind one. However, I'm being polite. Izuku gave Mina and Yanagi a soft wink while grinning naively and sipping his drink. Isn't it courteous to tell the truth? Yanagi, grinning merrily, contributed to the pair's suffering by placing her phone on the table with a proudly displayed meme that said, "Stop, give up. They've ped away already." Yanagi, are you there as well? Hunching over, Tetsu asked, what is this? Pick on hardening quirk user day, as he crossed his arms. Indeed. All four of the people who didn't have any hardening peculiarities nodded. It is scheduled to occur on any day that ends in Y. Mina gave a naive smile. Hold on, but doesn't every? The pinkhead broke into chuckles, and Kirishima gave his pseudo-sister a shove with one hand, causing the table to erupt in joyful laughter. You guys are regular visitors, then? Tetsu quickly clung to the hope when Izuku chose to be benevolent and change the topic. Yes, we have been visiting this place since we were young. The 1B Iron Man grinned, saying, this place is a lot of fun, but they have different hours for younger kids to come in with their parents. A group entering the venue is not permitted to depart until at least one member has finished singing. I reasoned that if we did this on a regular basis, we could all take turns going when. Not the case. Yanagi and Izuku both speak up at once, with Izuku aiming to finish as close to the back as possible. Not that. Mina and Tokage speak up first, then Kirishima joins in a moment after Tetsu. Really, guys, come on? Tetsu looked at each of them. You should go first since this was your idea. Kirishima gave this happy smile. I moved Kirishima to go after me. Izuku grinned. Agreed, Mina said. The motion was approved. With a fake serious attitude, Tokage nodded. Kirishima, we are grateful for your sacrifice. Yanagi gave him a head tilt. I despise everyone. Kirishima sulked alongside Tetsu. How did your CL in heroism go? When Izuku finally determined what to order, more people started to trickle into the karaoke bar, where the mic was about to open. He asked the 1B group. Quite enjoyable. Tokage nodded. We had an exercise where 3 heroes and 2 villains had to capture a bomb. I was fortunate enough to be assigned to a team where Tetsu was the villain. These 3 fools, Kamakiri, Monoma, and Bakugo, were our hero opponents. Izuku attempted to conceal his flinch at the name, even though he was certain that Tokage saw it. Those three were more interested in outdoing each other than in putting an end to us. By allowing them to battle and running down the clock, we actually prevailed. Your teacher was probably not amused. Mina shuddered, presumably imagining Aizawa's reaction to the show. Yes, Vlad-sensei was not in a good mood. Tokage smirked, shrugging, not that they would have had a chance against my peculiarity anyhow. Tokage, what is your oddity? Reiko and Yanagi grinned, and Izuku leaned forward, his quirk nerd light flashing, probably eager to watch someone else look astonished now that they knew what to anticipate. The name of it is Lizard Tail Splitter. Tokage proudly told him, I can split my body into multiple pieces. My limit is 50 for now. As she explained her peculiarity. Furthermore, every component can float and move more freely through the air. Even if they are destroyed, they will regenerate, but I would much rather just rejoin them. Thank God. Izuku gasped. You can fly? As his thoughts raced over the oddity, wide-eyed. Tokage scowled in confusion, saying, What? No? My pieces can levitate and move, yes, but I can't just take off. Why not? Staring her in the face, Izuku demanded, if you can make your pieces float and fly, then why not do it on your own? It's a single piece, made of the identical body parts. There will be 2 sections so the rest of you can fly, and if you need to split off a single hair or whatever, that's still technically a body part. Izuku was powerless to stop the thoughts and plans from flowing out, and with the right equipment and training, you might become an extremely skilled fighter. You may divide them into tiny flying knives and spears by wearing some gloves with claws over your fingers. Exercise to increase your strength so that when you tackle one problem, your arms can be used to strike someone or lift something other. They would effectively have to fight 3 opponents at once if they trained to concentrate on a kicking-based combat technique and have separate, weapon-wielding arms. If your split limbs are used as restraints, it would be beneficial to learn grappling techniques as well. You could even be able to work on enhancing your regeneration through training or a deeper comprehension of your own anatomy. Nobody was stopping him as he researched. Increasing the rate of regeneration, decreasing its depletion, or even making it function if you haven't split up like you can for flight. Whoa, 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 whoa. After the barrage of information, Tokage waved her hands excitedly, her eyes a little off focus. That's a lot of information. He frowned as he watched a single hair separate from the rest of her and float in midair, followed by the remainder of her body floating about an inch above the ground. It was true that his theory held true, even if it was just for a little while before she fell back down, possibly not accustomed to floating so much weight. Said he was intelligent. With a smile, Tetsu gave Kirishima a steely fist bump. Astute? With a wild motion, Tokage told him that calling Godzilla a large reptile is akin to having no sense of proportion. How in the world did you figure out my peculiarity so quickly? The most of that had escaped my notice? He's a weirdo. Best one around, Kirishima exclaimed as he and Mina threw their arms around him. And we own him entirely. Mina concurred, but I could be prepared to share with Yanagi or you because he needs a girlfriend. Mina and Tokage chuckled, and Izuku became pink, felt his face heat up. I feel excluded now. When Mina focused on Tetsu, he gulped instead of snorting. Well, that can't happen, can it? With a menacing smile, Mina nudged a finger beneath the iron quirk user's chin. Go sing. GG gotta go. Bye. Izuku got a sense that he would need to adjust to this kind of uncontrolled energy as Tetsu bounded to the stage, to the amusement of Mina and Tokage. Sekijiro-kan entered the 1B CL room and looked about at his 20 students, all of whom were seated even though many of them were speaking with people nearby. Nothing out of the ordinary, unless you included the tiny tub of sand Yanagi was using her peculiarity on, the telekinetics expression serious and focused. CL1B. I hope you're rested from your weekend and ready to work, he said, his voice bringing everyone's attention abruptly to the front of the room. Some of the more inattentive pupils jumped startled, having not heard his approach. Indeed, sensei. The majority of the CL responded in unison, and Bakugo simply huffed angrily while Khan attempted to hide a frown. As a student, the explosive boy was unbearable. In addition to his refusal to listen and belief that he was already the best at everything, he also had a combative style. During the fight trial, Khan observed that Bakugo either didn't appear to realize how volatile and harmful his explosions might be, or he didn't seem to care that much less killing his CL mates could be avoided because Recovery Girl could heal them. To be honest, he wasn't sure which was worse. Fantastic. Khan nodded with satisfaction. For the majority of you, today's homeroom will be free time to complete any homework or personal projects. The majority of us, sir? With a raised hand, Jiroda Shishida posed the question, causing the furious student's expression to contort in perplexity. Yes, the majority of you. Khan nodded. Today marks the appointment of CL representatives and vice representatives for the various first-year CLEs. He took a time to let that sink in. Sadly, that merely gave different students permission to start yelling. I am obviously the ideal candidate for this kind of role. When Monoma yelled, his eyes bulged out, and the people surrounding him winced at the intensity. Get rid of copy-paste. I will be in charge of this show, if somebody is going to do that. With a yell, Bakugo sprang loudly and tiny from his palms. You wouldn't be a better choice than me. That infuriated Kamakiri, as the youthful user of blade quirks had been focusing on Bakugo as a personal opponent. Not only were those three troublemakers yelling, but other people were also advocating for the post or disparaging the prospects of other candidates. And now, as his students, including Bakugo, quieted down, Khan shouted and slammed his fist into his desk with a loud thud. I've already decided who would fill the two posts. Initially, he was going to permit an election, but he didn't want to take a chance or offer some of the more erratic pupils more cause to become enraged with their peers. Please get up, Jiroda Shishida and Juzo Honanuki. The two wide-eyed boys obeyed his command. While Kamakiri appeared content that his competitor wasn't selected over him, Monoma appeared to accept this, the copy quirk user thankfully having a lot of respect for most of his peers. However, Bakugo. What do you mean those extras are in charge? Bakugo growled, his hands smoking as tiny explosions burst from the flesh. Those side characters can't give me directions. That's enough, Bakugo. You'll be staying after school every day for detention after that comment, Khan said, narrowing his eyes and transferring some of his blood to enclose and harden around the boy's hands to prevent future explosions. If you continue to act irrationally, it will be extended to a week. Do I make sense? Gritting his teeth, Bakugo threw himself huffily into his seat. Bakugo, I had a query for you. Khan gave the combative student a fierce look, unleashing a portion of the energy that had scared many evildoers. Clear? Indeed. Still furious, but with the wind knocked out of him, Bakugo grunted. Khan nodded and emptied the blood he had used into an adjacent waste vat. He wanted to make sure that the boy's sweat did not contain any nitroglycerin, which would render his blood useless. All right. You represent the CL, Honanuki. You were not only one of our 2 recommendation students, but you also demonstrated composure and initiative during the first week of CL by working with your peers. Shishida, you have demonstrated that you are extremely rational, well-organized, and disciplined. You also share Honanuki's teamwork-oriented mindset. Please remember that neither of you nor the other students in this CL can count on these positions being permanent. If you prove to be unsuited for the position, I'll step in to take your place, whether it's midway through the term or when you start your second year. I'd like you both to accompany me as we have a meeting with the other CL representatives to go over your responsibilities. I've mentioned that the remainder of you have a free period for homeroom. And anyone who misbehaved while I was away will regret it, if I find out. Aizawa with a sigh, Shota entered his CL room where his students were split up into groups according to their cliques or were free to do anything they wanted to do on their own. Good morning. I hope everyone had a better night's sleep than I had over the weekend, he sighed, not bothering to disguise his weariness from his CL mates. Striking a balance between his day job as a teacher and his night job as an active underground hero, he wasn't sure why he was so committed to maintaining both full-time. We don't have time for you to take a nap, even if you didn't. We have an extremely significant work that needs to be completed today. He allowed it to remain that way for a little while, relishing in his students' terrified bewilderment as they stewed in tension. You'll be choosing a CL representative and vice representative. A few appeared prepared to leap from their chairs upon hearing the unexpected news, perhaps anticipating a do-or-die situation. How are they going to be chosen, sir? As he asked his query, Ida's hand surged up into the air. You can all cast votes on it. By doing this, he would be able to determine who the CL looked up to and give them the final say. I would like to put in my own nomination for such a job. While several pleaded for a chance to take the position, Iida started robotically bowing to the CL. How are you doing, Midori bro? He overheard Kirishima ask, you gonna put your name in? To the greenied in the back. No, he heard Midoriya refuse, and I'm one of the 3 students in the CL who I believe shouldn't be representatives. Midoriya, tell me more. Seeking to gain a firm understanding of the issue child's perspective, Shota insisted, asking why the boy believed he wouldn't be the CL representative and who else shouldn't be. The CL representative is meant to serve as both a helpful role model for outside observers and a person whom students may confide in when they have questions. Think of how All Might is meant to be for the majority of pro heroes out there, Midoriya groaned. I'm not good among strangers, and throughout the battle trial and quirk apprehension exams, I made a lot of folks in this CL uncomfortable. Shota saw a few individuals flinch when called out like that, but Iida only appeared shocked by Midoriya's thoughtful remarks. No, I'd be a bad fit. However, you mentioned there were 2 more. Midoriya deadpanned and gestured at Mineta, and Mina tilted her head. You've all heard the little pervert say that he wants to establish rules dictating what the girls in the CL are allowed to wear in order to satisfy his obsessions. Once again, Midoriya's thoughts on the purple boy were evident, but at this point, Iida had a firm understanding of Mineta's character. Even though that implied that he disapproved of Mineta and Midoriya more, it was still a start and would ideally result in less conflicts. And me, I guess, being the last one? Iida rolled his eyes and sighed. Indeed, in a way. You look unlistening, ume things too quickly, are rigid, and are too intense to be friendly. Shota sighed, disappointed that his dreams of fewer clashes were short-lived. Midoriya listed without batting an eye. Sufficient. Here's how this will work. He ended it before it got out of hand. It's inevitable that someone will propose someone who they believe would be an excellent CL representative. However, remember that nominations are cumulative, so choose wisely. Nominees are given the option to resign if they choose not to accept the position, which does require additional work. Some of them lost hope after that. Those who are left will vote, with the representative taking first place and vice coming in second. Yaoyorozu, you go first, and we'll proceed down each row. Thankfully, the nomination process moved quickly, though there were a few unexpected moments, like when Uraraka continued to nominate Midoriya even after he had said he didn't think he would fit the role. Other moments of frustration included Mineta voting for Kaminari and then becoming enraged when Kaminari nominated Jiro, yelling at the blonde for squandering their opportunity to impose the regime together. 9 pupils ultimately had nominations. Each of the following had 1 vote: Jiro, Kaminari, Kirishima, Shoji, and Midoriya. Asui had 3, Ashido had 2, while Kendo and Yaoyorozu had 5 apiece. Now, who would like to withdraw? With a groan, Aizawa reached into his sleeping bag to find another juice pack. I'll do it, sensei. I've already explained why. Uraraka, who had nominated him, pouted and puffed up his cheeks as Midoriya moved forward and bent respectfully. In this case, too, he was shocked to see Kaminari come forward and groan meekly, saying, I'm going to have enough trouble keeping my grades up as is without extra work. Not my cup of tea. While Kaminari pouted at Jiro, the 3 sat down, along with Kirishima and Shoji, who did not provide an explanation. Jiro shook her head. Asui, Ashido, Kendo, and Yaoyorozu are the remaining ones. Shota scribbled the names on the board. Let's finish this up quickly since we need to get to the meeting after the representatives are chosen. Once more, if you are a nominee, you are not eligible to vote for yourself. Voting proceeded swiftly, with those who had nominated one of the final 4 candidates sticking with that choice while others appeared to be following their friends' ballots. Ashido received 4 votes instead of 2 nominations because Midoriya supported his other friend and Uraraka supported the demands of her unsuccessful candidate. Most likely, Kaminari simply followed Jiro's advice and cast her vote for Yaoyorozu. Mineta, who was optimistic, voted just for Yaoyorozu in the hopes of securing a later date. Thankfully, Siro just appeared to value Kendo. Fantastic. We have a meeting to get to. Yaoyorozu and Kendo, your CL representatives. The rest of you study till we return. Midoriya, that vote, man, it was something. With Uraraka having joined them today, Kirishima scowled as they made their way around the cafeteria, searching for their CL mates from CL1B. Yes, you're right. Even if they were only occasionally at lunch, the gravity quirk user grinned and said, I still think you'd have made a great representative, Midoriya. Not really. Eventually, they located Tokage, Tetsu, and Yanagi's table. The rest of 1B was nowhere to be seen, which, fortunately, meant no Bakugo. Izuku gave his head an awkward rub. Aw shucks. As they sat down, Tokage smiled and gave them a peace sign. Did you guys get your CL representatives today too? Who would Aizawa choose? Select. We had an election, Mina thought, blinking in confusion. I nearly prevailed. The pinkette pouted, her cheeks full of pout. Uraraka suggested Midori Bro, who declined. Izuku looked at him, and Kirishima called him out. And when I nominated you, you resigned. Izuku fired back, shattering his chopsticks in order to eat. Nevertheless, Momo Yaoyorozu and Itsuka Kendo were selected. For your CL, how about it? Our representatives were chosen by Vlad Sensei, Tetsu. Yes, in fact. If I had to guess and be asked to share my opinions, I would say that our teacher decided to choose our representatives for us instead of holding an election because he didn't want people with certain unstable personalities to have the opportunity to hold office, which could lead to further corruption. My theory seems plausible considering the arguments and yelling that took on prior to him declaring his choice and the penalties that ensued. Ultimately, the student who was most highly suggested by Snatch, the professional hero, Juzo Honanuki, was crowned the victorious student representative of CL1B. Jiroda Shishida is our vice representative and his assistant. They are both considerate and industrious students, and I have no doubt that they will give their all to carry out the additional responsibilities that have been assigned to them. Clearly, Yanagi had not given the gravity girl a hard sentence because Uraraka's eyes were watering. She believes that by choosing himself, their homeroom teacher intended to prevent some pupils from receiving jobs, and the fights and penalties that followed lend credence to her theory. She believes Honanuki and Shishida will perform well in their new roles. With ease, Izuku translated and shared a tub of his mother's baked cookies with everyone at the table, who eagerly tucked in. Oh my! These are excellent, Tokage groaned, a chocolate chip in his mouth. I have to see Mama Doria eventually, I must. The mother who reared you is someone I would also like to meet. Yanagi, who was practicing writing her name with her peculiar pencil grip, practiced speaking as she nibbled on her cookie and used a brief sentence for once. She has also been requesting to meet each and every one of you. Though his mother had been considerably more excited, Izuku said with a smile that he was finally happy to have true pals. However, just as he was about to make a suggestion, a loud alarm went out, sending kids into a panic and forcing them to evacuate. What is happening? With wide eyes, Uraraka yelled. An intruder alarm has gone off. A third year running by yelled in panic. Off, let's go. With her eyes narrowed, Tokage took command of the situation and led them towards the evacuation path. They found the hall full with terrified people who were not moving in a systematic manner, and more people were joining them from behind, adding to the pandemonium. Izuku was pressed against the window by a forceful shove from behind and realized that the teachers were confronting the journalists, who he believed to be the intruders. The press is to blame. His voice only reached his buddies as he let out a deep sigh. I understand now. With a smile, Tokage's body broke into multiple pieces as she flew overhead, slapping multiple pupils to grab their attention. Yo! Sheepishly panicked. Simply said, it's the press. Put an end to your infantile behavior and exit with some grace. Everything for one, all for one laughed to himself as he finished the contact with young Tamura, who was ecstatic about hacking into UA to obtain the itinerary for the school's impending travels to the USJ. The boy is overly arrogant. Are you going to let him be the one who uses that intelligence? His doctor moaned. Maybe choose one of the other options. You might be accurate. All for one considered the 5 acolytes he had taught, 5 strong individuals, each having their own armies and empires at their command. All of that didn't matter right now, but he still needs to mature and learn new things, which can't happen if he never gets the chance to attempt things on his own. Furthermore, Tamura isn't ready to find out about the other 4 just yet. While it would be preferable in the short run to give his information to someone else, it will eventually cause issues. Tamura will get his shot, he will have a Nomu, and even if he loses, it will initiate hostilities. Okay, Everyone, please log in. As the CL, most of them dressed in full hero garb, made their way to a bus to proceed to another school building, Kendo said, "If you don't behave correctly then I'll smack ya." She raised her hands to make her point more clearly. Kendo, wait till your CL mates are in danger before making threats. With a sigh, Aizawa said, "It better be justified." Indeed, sensei. With a shaky nod, the Orangeette helped herd everyone aboard the bus, with Yaoyorozu trying to convince Iida that the trip didn't actually require a seating arrangement. He turned to find a sulky, red-faced Midoriya in his gym clothes. Sulking as Kirishima showed Ashido and Uraraka a photo. The girls leaning on one another as they laughed uncontrollably. He had heard a remarkably loud batch of laughter. "Guys, hurry up. It's not funny," Midoriya moaned. "You're accurate." Ashido laughed heartily. "It's very funny." Wheezing, Uraraka finished. "Anything you would like to discuss with the CL?" Aizawa scowled as he walked closer to the rowdy gang. "You dare not." Kirishima continued to hold a phone, and Midoriya gave her a frown. Once more, the support division tampered with Midori Bro's hero outfit. Kirishima let out a wheeze. "I suspected that wearing only trousers wouldn't be the desired look for you." Looking at his green-haired pupil, Aizawa saw that he was alternating between embarrassment and irritation. This time, what went wrong? A Speedo, that is. With Plus Ultra inscribed on the back and a comic book POW thing on the front, Izuku buried his face in his hands as his pals continued laughing. "Power loader, Aizawa's eyebrows twitched. "Do you know why this keeps happening to your costume?" he asked. "I am not sure. The troubled child almost seemed to be yelling at me since I didn't ask for a challenging costume. I stated that considering my quirk, I didn't really need any particular support gear for it and that all I wanted was something that could grow with me when I transform." "Yes, that will work." Many support students take tremendous satisfaction in their work, so Aizawa sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose as the four students looked perplexed. It is usually offensive to them when someone says they don't need stance equipment, regardless of how justified that claim may be. While some may be being petty, others may be attempting to change it such that the support equipment is included regardless. "I'll discuss it with the head of that department." "I'm grateful, sensei." Midoriya nodded. "If it's okay with you, I'll just use the UA workout clothing in the interim. In the unlikely event that they must take over one of your heroics courses, I'll make sure the other professors are informed. All four of you board the bus now." "Indeed, sensei." They gave a collective nod and hurried to board the bus in order to get the remaining seats. Aizawa saw them go, still joking and laughing, and felt recollections of his own time at UA begin to surface before he mercilessly smothered them. He had no time for sentimentality or the accompanying hurt. As he leaned back in his seat, Izuku observed the tense and uncomfortable atmosphere in the bus. Everyone had noticed that he and the others boarded the bus last after speaking with their teacher, and since he had brought up their reactions to him on Monday, most of the CL had displayed awkward silence around him. "All right, this is becoming grating." Mina sighed and clapped loudly, saying, "Okay, kids, this quiet is getting old, real fast. I proclaim that you all are free to ask me or my fluffy friend any 3 questions, as I don't want this to turn into a mime training course instead of a hero training course." "Mina." Izuku attempted to look at her offer but was ignored. Mina, so just roll with it, dude." Kirishima laughed in confused frustration. "Ribbit, I'll go first then." Asui held up a hand and said, "I'll be straightforward. You seem to be acting strangely. Why do you seem to be changing your attitude so quickly?" "Bipolar jerk." Mineta mumbled as Izuku gave her a piercing gaze just as she was about to try to stammer out an embarrassing response. In that manner, satisfied with his attitude model, Asui nodded. "It's not that I'm good around people." Izuku disregarded the perplexed head tilt Uraraka gave at that statement, the eye roll Kirishima and Mina gave at it, and the fact that I also have a terrible stutter unless I'm thrilled or. It really annoyed me. Kaminari winced, perhaps recalling one of the occasions when Izuku had become agitated while changing. Years passed while I tried to keep my head down and avoid trouble by bottling everything up. Izuku grimaced as he thought back to his former school, still uncertain about how diligent the police he'd spoken to with the power hose couple would be in investigating the peculiar bullying and prejudice there. "And once I quit holding it all inside, You're easily agitated. It's not unusual for Aizawa-sensei to interrupt, startling Izuku and his pupils who Yumed the guy had been dozing off. You won't be the first, but you'll probably need to talk to Hound Dog about it. Indeed, sir. Izuku made the decision to try and be open-minded. Aizawa had been considerably superior to his previous instructors, so he thought at least he would give this guidance session a shot. Now for the second question. Hagakure seemed to be jumping in her seat, or at least he thought so. When she was just wearing shoes and gloves, it was difficult to tell, and now that he was visualizing it and becoming agitated, it was fantastic. I'm still not sure what your quirk accomplishes other than making you bald. I refer to my oddity as adaptation. Izuku saw that everyone in the CL, even the ignorant ones, was paying close attention. Basically, anything that happens to me doesn't kill me. Instead, it strengthens the transformed state. If I get burned, after I recuperate, I'll be more resistant to burns. I inflict blunt force injury, and the next time it grows more resilient to that. Furthermore, even though only the transformation may utilize them, my resistances are built up in both my changed and untransformed forms. Additionally, the quirk doctor described it as a minor healing factor that aids in my recovery from whatever it is that I must adjust to. The adaptation only becomes relevant once I've healed. Whoa. Hagakure gaped at it. Why? Tense. Izuku wasn't sure if Kaminari's slight sparking was due to worries or excitement. Does this mean that the longer you play a hero game, the more powerful you would become? Like an unstoppable juggernaut of some sort? Perhaps in the end. Izuku meekly stroked the back of his head, not knowing how to respond to his CL mate's outbursts. I'll answer the final query. The Oranget he'd met on the first day had talked to him now and then, but they hadn't really communicated much since. Had you picked up a real fighting technique to go along with your oddity yet? Kendo spoke up. Midoriya, you're going to learn how to be a married man. Got it? With narrowed brows, Kendo asked, and Ojiro nodded next to her. Midoriya, be careful. Kaminari laughed and said you might end up being enlisted as their own punching bag. Jiro gave the blonde a hard smack upside the head, ending her snickers. Kids, please act appropriately. We will arrive there quickly, Aizawa said with a red-eyed stare to everyone on the bus. This is not a playground. Rather, the site we are visiting is intended for disaster rescue training. There is a very real possibility of injury if you misbehave and act carelessly, so there will be consequences if I witness anyone not exercising the appropriate restraint in this situation. Do make sense? Indeed, sensei. As they rounded a corner and began to approach a large domed edifice, Izuku and his pupils responded as a group, their teacher being satisfied with their response. As Aizawa got off the bus, she gave the problem children structure a sly smile. Greetings from the USJS. Do you really need to call those students Aizawa? Turning, Izuku heard a voice that was both confused and irritated. She was leaving the building with a puffy spacesuit on. He heard Uraraka squealing like a fangirl behind him, telling everyone around her that 13 was her favorite hero. When it ceases to be true, I'll stop saying it. After shrugging that off with indifference, Aizawa looked about, wondering, where's All Might? He ought to have arrived by now. He was delayed. When Izuku heard that, he scowled in perplexity and watched as 13 held up 3 fingers, which caused Aizawa to appear agitated. The pro-rescue hero then turned to face the kids, a smile visible even through her heavy black mask. Hello students. As some of you may already know, I'm the Pro Hero 13, the Pro Hero said. Let me just say one thing before we start. Okay. Maybe 2. Maybe 3, or perhaps 5. Before shaking herself, Izuku pondered whether this was a common occurrence with her. Nevertheless, pay close attention. You are undoubtedly aware that I have a strong peculiarity called black hole. I can use it to transform anything I point my fingers at into dust by ing it up. Yes, indeed. Uraraka exclaimed. You've saved numerous people from a variety of tragedies in the past with black hole. The vivacious brunette was practically bouncing around in a way that had nothing at all to do with him. That is accurate, really. 13 nodded, but it could also be used to murder someone with ease. The conversation rapidly turned serious at that point, and I'm sure many of you can relate. In our society of superhumans, eccentricities are closely monitored and controlled by the government and the pro-heroes, so we rarely consider the potential dangers we may pose. You could make an irreversible error with just one slip-up, one poor decision, or one incident of abusing authority. You probably have a decent idea of what your peculiarities are capable of from Aizawa's fitness test. You may remember from All Might's combat training how erratic your power can be when directed against someone else. Apply the knowledge you have gained to my CL. You won't be competing with one another or utilizing your power to combat here. You will be taught how to save lives here, since protecting the safety of others is the main responsibility of a true hero. 13 is my favorite number. Behind him, Uraraka gushed, and he couldn't argue. I appreciate your attention, and that is all I have to say. After the speech, Izuku and his CL mates applauded, and their instructor bent down. However, applause from further in the room became more audible as the CL's cheering subsided. My. Izuku noticed a pale man with chopped hands applauding slowly and mockingly in the facility's central courtyard as he looked beyond his teachers. That was quite the speech 13. I nearly choked on it because it was so damned wholesome. You are who you are? Aizawa squinted at the person, asking, what are you doing here? Why? There are just 2 reasons why someone attends a school, the madman said with a laugh. They're there to teach or to learn. As more and more persons moved closer, the pale guy raised his arms and a thick, ominous fog appeared behind him. I'm here with a lesson for all the kids who want to play heroes. The majority wore different quirk mutations, and all bore grins that were sadistically gleeful. Yes, they're playing. The fog shifted, revealing a primitive man with brilliant yellow eyes that gleamed from its dark depths. A deep voice boomed from the fog, saying, the only real heroes I see are 13 and Eraserhead. According to our sources, All Might ought to have also been present. How impolite of him. Izuku narrowed his eyes as the man with the hands all over him talked. He was clearly putting on a show, grandstanding. For the true villain, this was an act, a game, not who they really were. The villain was purposefully putting on a show because he wanted to be perceived in a particular light. He doesn't even have the decency to show up, even after we go to all the work of making so many new acquaintances who wanted to meet him. Maybe if I murder a couple young children, All Might will move more quickly. Kill us, please? The teachers will stop them, right? Mineta squeaked the nappy-like bowl on the pervert's costume, maybe coming in helpful for once if his crying was any hint. I have no desire to die. Put an end to it. Your whimpering isn't going to east anyone, Izuku snarled, his eyes narrowing as he glared down at the criminals who seemed unaffected by the presence of the CL and who felt comfortable enough to talk fearlessly. How come the alarms aren't going off? Yaoyorozu inquired, and as 13 ushered them back and Aizawa readied his capture weapon, the gang huddled closer together. They must be hiding their presence with some peculiarity. With a nonchalant grin, Todoroki said, or have they managed to attack the entire campus at once? No, that fog is a person with a peculiarity related to transportation. Izuku turned his attention to the gathering, observing how disorganized some of the criminals appeared, some huddled into small groups and others strutting around alone. If that's how they plan to enter or exit, they should have him keep an eye on them just in case. Well thought out, Midoriya. After nodding, Kendo looked over her shoulder and asked, is that radio for show? To Kaminari. No, but even so, I'm unable to connect. Kaminari scowled and quickly hopped on one leg while grasping the radio over his ear with a sparking palm. Referring to a peculiarity based on electricity or technopathy, Izuku concluded. Well done. Fetch them out of here and fetch me some help. 13. Aizawa stiffened, goggles and weapon in position. I'll take care of this garbage. How come? Izuku blinked, shocked that their teacher was attempting to battle them alone, especially because everything she knew about the man indicated that stealth or one-on-one combat was how he operated best. Hell, it sounded more plausible to just stand here and neutralize the bunch while 13 used the black hole on them. However, it was also excessively deadly and may backfire if someone had a rapid reply that Aizawa was unable to neutralize. You can't be a pro with just one trick, I assure you, Midoriya. Aizawa sent a self-earned grin over his shoulder, and in that instant, it carried a message all its own and was just as comforting as All Might's well-known smile. They were disciples of Aizawa, and anyone wishing to cause harm to them would have to force their way past him before they could even attempt it. Sensei, kick there. With his mouth clenched, Kirishima appeared to be about to lose control, but 13 stopped him. You can count on it. Aizawa nodded and then leapt forward like a bullet, heading straight for the bad guys as 13 made their CL retreat in the direction of the doors, determined not to lose the opportunity their homeroom teacher had given them. Barely had they retraced their steps when a swirling black gate materialized on the ground, blocking their path as fog rose up with those sharp yellow eyes. "It's a brave endeavor, kids, but you cannot go out." "It's a pleasure to meet you," the sophisticated echoing voice said as it emerged from the mist. UA Academy students are among the best and brightest in Japan. They're our nation's bright future. The League of Villains is here to teach you all about the harsh realities of life. But it appears that our agreed-upon symbol of peace has not materialized. How impolite of him to skip CL. It doesn't matter, there must have been a change in plans. There's still work for me to do. The mist grew like skeletal wings. Go to hell. As ice surged towards the smoke figure, encasing them in a cocoon of frozen spikes, Todoroki's cold, indifferent voice bit out. Hee hee. Well done, Todoroki. Arms tensing from excitement, Kirishima smiled. Did you holes really think we were just going to let you tear this place apart? She asked. The villain answered with a sinister grin, smoke billowing from the mist that appeared to be condensing at the top of the spikes. Kids, you really do live up to the reputation of your institution. But you ought to exercise greater caution. If not, someone might suffer harm. Now move out of the way, 13 yelled, and Izuku realized that she was now unable to defend them without endangering their lives up here because she had attempted to stay in the rear to thwart any attacks from behind. I'll disperse you throughout this building. The figure of fog stretched its shape widely, sending out tendrils of darkness to envelop them, whipping up the winds to meet my allies in your demise. Akaraka Uraraka sat up, groaning, and saw Shoji, with several of his branching limbs ending in bleeding stumps, withdraw his stretched tentacles from where the wall of shadows had been. She observed that he had also succeeded in grabbing 13, Aoyama, Kirishima, Iida, and Shiro at her side. It looks like more of you than I thought were able to get past my warp barriers. I adore surprises, laughed the void-like creature. They maintain an engaging atmosphere. Ida. I have a mission for you, Engine Quirk Bearer. 13 was staring dead at the villain when Uraraka turned to look at her idol's dominating voice. 13, indeed. Despite the severe circumstances, or maybe even more so because of them, the freckled youngster appeared eager to follow directions from a higher authority. Please get back to the school and seek I stance for me. It hasn't stopped even with Eraserhead canceling quirks left and right, so whoever is interfering with our connection needs to stay well concealed. Going to obtain aid would be quicker for you than it would be for us to locate them. Uraraka felt a wave of hope when 13 delivered her orders. Shoji had found the ideal individual to help them escape. However, I'm unable to. It would be shameful to just up and leave you all behind, Iida objected. To flee like a cow. His words were interrupted by a stern backhand from Aoyama, who was, for once, not grinning. Then we can all perish if you stay here and act brave. Uraraka recalled the Frenchman stating agony from utilizing his quirk for more than a second before he spat and clutched his stomach as if in anticipation. Our CL mates and friends are battling for their lives while you refuse to obtain aid. We will smash through those gates. You'd best do your duty too, Shoji hissed, her new arms sprouting even as blood covered her huge CL mate's torso. However, Iida started even as everyone else disregarded him, and Uraraka gave him a hard backslap. I took your gravitation there. Shiro, you realize what I'm thinking. She tried to maintain the intensity she saw in 13, even though she knew full well that she was acting. You're a crazy genius, Uraraka. She could feel the villain's sneer as she and her CL mates shouted out battle cries and charged him from all angles. The tape user grinned, realizing her strategy. Do you really believe that it is a good idea to plan in front of your opponent, even if it is your only choice? More flashes of darkness were unleashed by the fog. When I'm done with you, it won't matter if you know what we're up to or not. The finger cap of 13's suit burst open, and as the pro-hero black hole suited in dark clumps of mist and fog, the wind tugged at Uraraka's hair. Black hole. The fog figure appeared to be spewing out increasing amounts of mist, perhaps in an attempt to create a barrier to protect himself from 13's quirk. The ability to absorb everything and reduce it to dust. A very amazing talent that is sadly wasted on someone like you. Whoever avoids battle concentrates on protecting people from the fury of nature. You have almost little combat experience now, Uraraka thought, noticing the smug look in those yellow eyes and the lack of battlefield awareness. A warp gate materialized at 13's back and at his front as he was speaking, her suit shattering under the redirected force of her own eccentricity. You've transformed yourself into dust. I apologize. 13's feeble voice was hardly audible above the fading wind before her peculiarity ended and her body collapsed on the ground. Not at all. With a cry, Uraraka lunged towards the creature that had just caused her idol's injury. Iida, move. With a vicious growl, Shoji charged at the doors with Kirishima and her as Zero wrapped a piece of tape around Iida to give him momentum. A sheep that thinks it can get away from the wolves is so sweet. When Zero threw the white-armored student flying towards the doors, the fog figure smiled and fixed his attention on Iida. When he eventually turned on his engines, the propulsion increased even more. A chubby puppy is all I see, Shoji screamed and leapt at the warp gate that was suddenly in Iida's way, encasing it like membranes inside his wing to demonstrate that the warp gates functioned like fog instead of merely appearing to. You impudent vermin. I'm tired of you, Warper growled, spreading out his dark form and extending like a slamming cobra in the direction of an onrushing Iida. We've had enough of you, Uraraka growled and sprang towards the shining metal brace that she could see through the mist. She slapped her hands on it, realizing that her intuition that he was a real person had been confirmed. Keep running, Iida. She yelled, tossing the villain into the air while Zero launched some tape to form a rope. Now, go find yourself. By swung Zero's tape rope around and throwing the mist villain skyward, Kirishima was able to give the gang enough time to let Iida escape via the entrance and head back towards campus. Her CL mates hurried over, some to check on her and the others to try and help 13, but they didn't have much time to celebrate as the shadowy figure disappeared through one of his own warp gates. Uraraka's quirk caused the sudden change to something else, dropping her to her knees and bile surging past her lips. She was unsure of the length of time she spent kneeling there, heaving out her breakfast and attempting to stop the world from spinning, but she was startled out of her reverie by an irate growl. Uraraka stood up, feeling Kirishima pull her up, and went to the top of the steps to gaze out into the courtyard. There, she saw Midoriya charging in, transformed and enraged, and Aizawa lying on the ground, motionless. Shit. With a scream, Kaminari lost control over the suffocating black miasma as he fell face first into a big lake, with a few other figures already swimming around in it. Tightening his grasp on his peculiarity, Kaminari clenched his eyes shut, determined not to let his CL mates who could have gotten through too get zapped once he hit the water. He winced from the force of the collision as he opened his eyes, about to scream and gasp for air when he spotted a villain with a shark-like trait charging in his direction. It's time to pee on, kid. Nothing personal. With a yell, the shark man's mouth opened wider than Kaminari could have imagined, potentially severing a good portion of a straight student. Hello, Kaminari. Sue shouted in joy as she struck the shark guy's head with her feet first. Yaoyorozu clung to her CL mate as Sue shot her tongue at him, her long appendage encircling his appendage as she shot through the water, dragging him along behind. See you later, she enthusiastically yelled behind at the villain as he quickly fled. Regards, Asui. When their amphibian CL mate put them off on the deck of a yacht in the lake, Yaoyorozu panted. Give me a call, Sue. Sue chastised them as he ascended the boat's side in pursuit, with an increasing number of water-based villains breaching the lake's surface. I could kiss you, Sue, panting. Kaminari gazed at Sue as if she were the most amazing person that had ever existed. It's not the right time. Sue flushed, startled by his remark, and Kaminari did the same after digesting what he'd blurted out. But we require a strategy. There are a lot of bad guys down there, Yaoyorozu thought as she stood up and wrung the water out of her hair with a groan. You have an oddity with electricity, is that right, Kaminari? Could you utilize it to deal with those bad guys down there? Not without also doing you two harm. With a frown, Kaminari expressed his frustration at not being able to aim his quirk yet and that he couldn't use it on pals who were too close to him. I can produce enough electricity to cover myself in it or unleash it in bursts, but when I do so, the energy just spreads out without any direction. Since I'm not immune to electricity, I couldn't even simply jump back into the lake, and I would most likely kill myself trying to charge that lake. Without a doubt, I won't do that. But what can we do? Sue firmly shook her head. I'm not sure if I could carry you both and jump all the way over the lake. I understand now. Yaoyorozu clapped with excitement, her eyebrows furrowed in concentration, A light emanating from her bare skin as a gleaming chain began to show between her s. He hardly had time to register this before Sue, looking shocked, slapped a palm over his eyes and exclaimed, "Ribbit! Solid aluminium, which is very conductive, makes up this chain. Could you utilize the chain you're holding to frighten the bad guys into submitting?" "I ought to be able to." From behind Sue's hand, Kaminari nodded, saying, "If I'm careful, I can take out just enough to avoid killing them. Sue should be able to leap us most of the way across the lake once the charge ends." "I think this sounds like a good concept, but what should we do once we exit the lake?" Sue inquired, and Kaminari imagined her in her head in thinking. "Together with the rest of the CL, we attempt to reamble at the steps." When he heard the sound of a chain stop rattling, Yaoyorozu announced confidently, suggesting that she had finished extracting metal from the ether. "But what about all the bad guys?" Sue lifted up the chain with a big, weighted end and inquired, eventually removing Kaminari's face. "They came here to destroy All Might. They most likely have a plan that they believe will work if they went to the trouble of gathering this many people and breaking in here. Then there would be no hope for us. What we can do is gather our CL, get the flying out of here, call for backup, and watch with some popcorn as All Might reduces the enemies to a big puddle of goo." Kaminari was terrified and wasn't ashamed to admit it. "You'd prefer not to fight?" Sue gave him a somewhat shocked look. "Aizawa is an expert. I'll have faith in his ability to manage himself. We would merely obstruct him." As he picked up the chain, Kaminari shook his head and said, "Now get as far away from me as you can. I don't want to risk shocking either of you." The villains began teasing and laughing as Kaminari swung the chain towards the river after the girls had moved enough away. "Brat, you were missed." The shark won, a huge bruise across half of his face, smirked and yelled. "I realize it's shocking." With a smile on her face, Kaminari ignited the link, causing the energy to radiate across a portion of the lake. The villains let out a shout, jerking and cramping before becoming dark. If they were breathing underwater before he came, at least they wouldn't drown. "Kaminari, you need to work on your puns." As she and Yaoyorozu emerged, Sue gestured with a finger to the frog girl's mouth while Kaminari sulked. "Sue, that is just mean. It's quite mean." With a groan, Kaminari began pulling his chain out of the water, turning off his quirk to give the water time to lose its charge and become safe enough for Sue to jump them back across. Kendo with a grunt, Kendo landed hard, causing Ojiro to fall next to her. They discovered they were in a burning metropolis, with a number of criminals flaunting their oddities and weaponry. "Ojiro, are you okay?" Dropping into a position, Kendo inquired as she held out her hand. "Kendo can never be better." Her companion fighter emitted a grunt and cracked his neck, letting out a whipping tail. He was like, "Look at this gift that Mist Guy gave us." The villains appeared perplexed as Kendo sensed that they were being thrown off guard by the jokes. "Every target we could ever desire to put our combat techniques to the test and release all of this tension." Kendo grinned savagely yet cheerfully. "Then, my lady, should we battle our way back to CL?" With his tail smashing into a garbage can and part of the metal caving in, Ojiro cracked his knuckles, making the other villains and thugs appear much less confident. "Yes, we definitely will. Who gets to earn a smoothie by taking out the most thugs?" She proposed to focus on joking and diverting her attention from the terrifying thought that a group of evildoers were out to get her. "On Kendo, you are." With a nod, Ojiro sent them hurtling towards the thugs, using their limbs to battle their way out of this hellscape engulfed in flames. "Tokiyami, an insane feast of gloominess, certainly." Tokiyami growled, Koda lurking behind him, as dark shadow thrashed around the squall area, powered by the darkness, but with enough light from the building lights and the sporadic artificial lightning strikes to prevent his quirk from spiraling out of control. Peering over his shoulder, he noticed his placid friend surrounded by a few comatose thugs. He questioned, receiving a shaky thumbs up from the rock-like quirk user. "All right, let's go. Our friends depend on us." Todoroki hihi. Todoroki scoffed as he fell into what appeared to be a freshly completed landslip, with splintered stone and broken trees surrounding him and villains emerging from any small patch of shade they could find. "Really? We received a small candy cane brat, that's all? Could they not have sent us a gorgeous woman or something?" One of them sounded angry about this. One or two stacked ones had to exist. Todoroki's face froze, then froze again. The ice rapidly expanded, covering the landslip area and trapping the criminals inside, revealing just their faces. It spread like wildfire. You are aware. As the villains cursed and fought against their frozen chains, Todoroki walked up to one of them, his tone dripping with venom. Extended exposure to that much ice would be extremely harmful to one's health. Since prolonged hypothermia will probably result in cell death, can you please respond to my inquiries? W. What on earth are you? The villain he picked to question whimpered in fear, wide-eyed. How are you going to kill All Might? First, idly seeing a dazzling flash of lightning over near a lake in another portion of the USJ site, Todoroki ignored the villain's horrified question. Before any body parts are irreversibly gone due to frostbite, I would respond. Mina mai, oh. As Jiro and Sato fell next to her on the concrete floor of a collapsed building, Mina moaned and rubbed her painful buttocks. I know how to soothe it with a rub. As they descended from the roof, a menacing villain with a lizard-like appearance yelled. Stranger risk. As the villain shrieked and kicked Mina out the window in fear, Mina screamed and swung forth a kick laced in acid. That was just too simple. Jiro scowled, her elongated earlobes snapping to electrocute a few more baddies, while Sato effortlessly subdued a fourth without even having to reveal his sweet tooth. These guys are all quite frail. They can't just ume that numbers will be enough to eliminate All Might, thought Sato with a frown. Except if there are a couple more powerful ones in the courtyard. Mina gave it some thought. Although she might not be as intelligent as Midoriya, most of the time she wasn't a fool. It was a powerful warp gate person. Using a hardened quirk thug as a bat to bash them around, Sato began hitting more of the thugs. If the warp gate guy isn't giving instructions, their leader is surely stronger. Who knows how many other powerful ones there are, either. With one of her lobes piercing the wall, Jiro nodded. The majority of them are fleeing after witnessing Mina punt one through a window while smeared in acid. What should we do next? With a scowl, Sato reached for his sugar packets. And more. We're heroes. Mina pumped her fist. Before we go grab the teachers, let's see if any of the others need ice stance. Yes, exactly, the others, relieved to have a strategy, nodded. Hey, look. As they emerged from the mist, Minetta's high-pitched screams made his position abundantly evident, and Hagakuri's thrashing boots and gloves also assisted him in determining the whereabouts of the invisible female. Izuku changed shape and positioned himself to shoot down more quickly, grabbing Hagakuri and Minetta with his expanded hands. Get ready for impact. Izuku braced himself as he landed with a boom, his deeper voice calling to them above the wind and Minetta's shouts. Are the two of you okay? Izuku growled and carefully put them down, listening for any baddies in the vicinity with his ears pricked up. I'm all right, Midoriya. Hagakuri nodded, his gloved hands trembling. I have no desire to die. Minetta cried and gripped his hairballs, saying, I haven't even gotten to touch a boob or kiss a girl yet. Minetta, get a grip. Hagakuri became agitated as Izuku observed multiple villains appearing on the slope, with some even seemingly emerging from the earth. I will not perish until I get to grope a female. Minetta's eyes widened as his head swiveled between Hagakuri and the criminals, especially the one who, for some reason, had on a white bunny girl suit. Minetta finally leapt at Hagakuri. Izuku wasn't sure if it was because he was afraid of the villainous bunny girl or because she was technically nude. In any case, it seems like Minetta made the decision that he would approach a female at any cost before ping away. Unfortunately for Minetta, Hagakuri was not having any of it, and as the pretty worthless pervert flopped around on the ground, he lashed out with a fist to his nose. Izuku commanded Hagakuri to stay behind him while he prepared his fists. At this point, he was counting 26 criminals, at least half of whom had bladed weapons of some kind, such as scythes or knives. How adorable that he believes he can protect her. One of the bad guys, who had the odd appearance of a chicken with human features, scowled and stretched his arms, appearing to be prepared to fight. Come on, let's go. A man wearing tattered clothes and brandishing a knife began to approach, but Izuku blocked the strike with a powerful punch that knocked the thug unconscious. His fist was larger than the man's head. Grab him. As the villains charged, a man in the back who looked like a stone golem yelled, demonstrating that they were inexperienced villains by having some of them get in each other's way. Izuku yelled, lashing out whenever one of the thugs approached. Hagakuri, on the other hand, picked up dropped weapons to sneak in additional hits while the thugs were concentrating on him. Minetta, meanwhile, kept rolling on the ground, clutching what appeared to be a broken nose. The majority of the thugs charged in, slashing Izuku's limbs and body with knives and scythes. Friendly fire brought down at least 1/3 of the thugs, and none of the bad guys gave a damn about their allies or took care to avoid hitting them. "Are you okay, Hagakure?" Izuku grimaced and panted, taking a knife from his shoulder blade. As of yet, his quirk hadn't actually adapted all that much against cutting. Fine. Hagakure's gloves were trembling, and she was clutching a knife in each fist that was bleeding red from the several stabs and slashes she'd given the thugs whenever they approached. She obviously wasn't used to hurting people, especially not to the extent of drawing blood, even though none of them were deadly. "You broke my dosage." With an infuriated cry, Mineta yelled and grasped his injured face. "Isn't he a mouthful little thing?" The white-uniformed bunny girl appeared to have been watching her colleagues push themselves against Hagakure's swords or his bone-breaking punches when a new voice laughed as Izuku's head snapped over. "Isn't he, honey? He really is. Playtime is done. You performed okay against the gutter trash kids, but a villain in green armor and a mask shaped like a skull smashed stone as he dragged himself from the earth, electricity crackling on his arms. Put your hands up, please, if you want to avoid being fried. Honey, please, you know they won't pay attention." With small balls of pink and white flame dancing atop her fingers, the villainous bunny girl chuckled. "I suppose." The villain with a skull shrug said, "Let's just toast em." The girl then hurled the flame balls towards them, causing Mineta's cries to become louder. Izuku growled and threw open his arms when the fireballs struck him, only managing to cause a minor burn considering how frequently Bakugo's nitroglycerin-like sweat had burned him in the past. The two criminals who remained gaped, their eyes wide, and small sunburn-like spots disfigured his skin. "You're a little tougher than I thought you would be, kid." The villain wearing a skull mask appeared somewhat thrilled by the possibility of a thrilling battle, but his words were interrupted when he shifted to avoid a boulder that Izuku was hurling. His thrown rock struck the bunny female villain, who was not as quick and fell with a stifled gasp, probably breaking a few ribs. "All right, I'm furious now." The man with the skull mask growled and narrowed his eyes at the condition the woman was left in. "Bring it on." Izuku sprang forward, clenching his teeth as the excruciating lightning struck and scorched his flesh. He struck, but the burns were much more severe than anything the fireballs could have done. "You're not as hardy as you appear." Then, after examining him with narrowed eyes, Skullmask laughed. "Whatever, it's time to die, KRK." Hagakure used her invisibility to sneak up on the lightning villain and break the dropped club from another club over his helmet, causing him to fall to the ground and crack his skull helmet. "Many thanks, Hagakure." Izuku sighed, straightened, and picked up a large kanabo, which he intended to use as a cane to help him catch his breath and as a weapon in case more villains appeared. "Come on, we have to get back to the others. Move your, Mineta." Aizawa's vision blurred as the Meve charcoal black beast pounded his face against the concrete ground again, bones shattering loudly upon impact. He gritted his teeth to keep back a scream, not wanting his students to hear. The exposed muscle in his destroyed elbow was screaming in pain, matching the fractured bones in its throbbing. "Eraserhead, what do you think of him?" At the query, "He's the bioengineered anti-symbol of peace." The maniac with his hands all over himself was virtually panting with pleasure. "But you can address him as Namu." The creature, its hands still holding onto its limbs, shrieked unnaturally at hearing its name, and Aizawa's undistributed arm bowed in ways that no bone should ever bend. "Your ability to erase oddities. It's nothing special, but it's annoying. When confronted with truly immense power, you could as well be a harmless little child." Nomu started to twist the already broken arm as the scoundrel spoke. Aizawa's stomach fell when he heard a familiar voice yelling angrily, "Get the hell away from him," before the skin could be irreparably torn. Nomu, Aizawa, and the psychopath turned to see Midoriya leaping over in his altered form and slamming a kanabo into Nomu's face, striking the villain in the teeth without even moving them. "Is that one of your students?" The psychopath laughed as Nomu extended her arm to grab the kanabo, breaking the war weapon in her hands and going straight for the kill. "How aggressive." The psychopath was speaking, and Aizawa was grunting and trying to negate the giant monster's quirk by blinking the blood out of his eyes. However, Aizawa was only able to east Midoriya momentarily when his student punched Nomu in the face, sending some teeth flying before the giant creature squeezed his arm, breaking bones crunching as Aizawa finally screamed, his quirk disappearing. Aizawa watched as it faded, the skin bulging and writhing around Nomu's mouth, as fresh, sharp fangs forced their way through the monster's gums. A quirk of resistance and one of healing. Did it resemble Midoriya? I don't like this brat, Nomu. Get rid of him. The mist-bodied villain materialized at Aizawa's side, and the hand-covered maniac waved a leisurely palm, his words unheard as Aizawa's ears rang from all the blows to his skull. Nomu let out a screech, knocked him on the ground, leapt at Midoriya, and struck his student hard in the face. Aizawa felt two hands trying to pull him up as he lay in a crater, his wounds beginning to pool blood. HRN. In an attempt to clear his vision and speak, Aizawa fought to form words as whatever was lifting him out of the crater traded blows with the two behemoths, booming loudly enough for Aizawa's injured hearing to hear. A pair of boots and gloves appeared out of nowhere as he was taken into the bushes. Hagakure. He saw Mineta trembling in the bushes, her fists clenched over his mouth and tears streaming over her clearly broken nose. Hurry up, we have to return to the others. We need to help him. Hagakure was shaking when he heard her turn, maybe glancing back at where they'd left Midoriya. Hey, that's me. Mineta growled in protest, giving Hagakure a look that would make her question him later. Put an end to it, Hagakure angrily remarked. All you've done since we arrived is make things easier for the bad guys. Once he was able to speak, he felt compelled to question them. We need to get to 13, and we need more teachers. Izuku can buy us a little bit of time, but not much. Izuku threw another punch into the gut of this Nomu guy, his fist doing nothing, the force of his blows doing nothing more than rippling the skin like gelatin, bulging muscles shaking before settling back into rigid conformity, all while screaming in rage and, admittedly, pain from all the blows that had long since started to overcome even the resistance he'd built up. Healing, shock absorption, and who knew what else? Who knows what kinds of tricks and skills this animal could have possessed if it was truly bioengineered. Kurogiri, this is getting rather dull. The person with hands on his body groaned as Nomu delivered another blow that sent Izuku's big gray bulk hurtling towards the ground. Despite Izuku's determination and resistance, the bruising left a dark mark on his flesh. After that, step in and end the matter. The mist guy answered back in a courteous but curt tone, as if he wanted to chastise the main villain but didn't know how or wasn't able to. Izuku heard the leader give out a frustrated sigh before he could attempt to decipher that, or do anything but stay upright amid the terrible barrage of strikes that felt like All Might was attempting to turn him into powder. The pale monster grabbed Izuku's arm and started digging in while Nomu restrained him. That was the last thing Izuku knew. With a shriek, Izuku dropped to a knee as his right arm was slammed to the ground, dripping blood from the severed limb and the stump it came from, while the Nomu held his other arm. So, in the end, you're just a huge punching bag. Shaking the blood from his fingers, the bastard laughed and said, maybe I'll take you back with me and make a new pet. Or maybe not. The villain toyed with Izuku's severed arm as he was speaking, causing the limb to flip Izuku the bird. Be careful. Izuku turned after hearing Kaminari's delighted voice and saw several of his CL mates rushing to try to save him. Observing Kaminari, he saw lightning lighting along the length of the metal chain as he lashed out. He noticed Mina, using a tactic they discussed during one of their brainstorming meetings during the week, to funnel her acid like a geyser by holding her palms together. Yaoyorozu, she materialized and aimed and fired a cannon. Todoroki unleashed a thunderclap of ice javelins. They all vanished into a whirling mist portal before Izuku's world burst into even greater agony. Izuku shouted as Kaminari's chain struck his chest, sending lightning ripping through his body. Yaoyorozu's cannonball struck him in the left knee, causing the bone to break and sending his limb and arm crashing to the ground. His left arm was engulfed in a shower of Mina's acid, melting it off at the shoulder. And as more of Todoroki's spikes struck his stomach, his remaining foot tore apart. He felt the doors to the USJ blast inward with relentless force, watched them all freeze in dread, and heard the one covered in hands laugh in vicious joy. Steel warped beneath his hand, sending a cloud of dust pouring out into the domed edifice, and the USJ echoed from the deafening boom of his blow crashing in the Meve metal doors. Partway down the steps, All Might observed a group of youngsters looking up at him with delight and relief as he came in, fist holding his jacket hard. It was unable to calm his raging fury. "Students, have no fear." With a growl that resembled, "I am here," All Might snapped, his tie coming loose and his teeth grinding together. He was prepared to deliver a speech that would both roar his kids and unsettle the baddies. However, he then had a clear view of the plaza. He noticed other CL mates staring at a CL mate with horrified emotions on their faces. He witnessed his CL mate's extreme disfigurement, beyond anything he had witnessed in his years of work, with the disintegrating warp gates and evidence of the alts indicating the cause of the majority of the injuries. He saw grasping one of young Midoriya's severed limbs was a monstrous black creature, so identical to All for One's earlier experiments that it made him sick. He watched as this group of slime played with Midoriya's other arm, making vulgar gestures with the amputated limb. Red was all that Might saw. Shigaraki finally, the valiant piece of trash, shows up after all this waiting. Playing with his new toy, Shigaraki laughed. "I guess our little game can continue." His remarks were interrupted as he felt a surge of wind, saw All Might disappear from his location, and heard the sound of ripping steel more quickly than Shigaraki could comprehend. As All Might plunged through Nomu, who had taken the blow, he felt the blood covering him and the iron taste filling his mouth. The tip of All Might's spear seemed to be aimed far enough to let All Might overcome shock absorption. Shigaraki was so terrified of the hero's face that he had not felt dread since he was a young boy. Those blue, hate-filled, shadowy eyes, the severed arm of the gray-skinned brat that was dangling lifeless fingers, all of it. All Might grunted and swung his homemade lance, launching the skewered Nomu with a loud splash into the lake. "Pupils! Get Midoriya and return to the entrance," All Might's voice demanded, taut with fury but plainly intended at everyone but the heroes and their little brats. Shigaraki saw that every thug between them and the steps was unconscious and flung around as the man shouted his order, having included scattering them like leaves in a storm as part of All Might's charge to try and kill him. Shigaraki, loathing himself for it, took a cautious step back as All Might returned his focus to him completely. Was he going to go right for the kill? "What a cowardly symbol of peace you are. You have disfigured my pupil." The CL mates quickly grabbed the gray-skinned brat in his severed limbs, hauling off the enormous, screaming, thrashing youngster who had used his quirk to rot off one of his limbs while All Might continued to walk. Shigaraki felt a knot form in the pit of his stomach when All Might saw, or mentioned, his oddity. How, you ask?" Shigaraki briefly questioned if he had overreached himself. Aizawa's elbow was damaged, while Midoriya's arm and stump had degraded and been tainted with evil flesh. All Might clenched his fist around the lamppost in his arm, the GL top and blood-stained metal quivering. "You should always keep your pinky finger elevated and away from your current task. I've spent years fighting filth like you, so I know how to read my opponent's body language." This man, with all of his eccentricities, was the one who had battled his master and fled All for One in such a fragile state that he was barely alive. Not prepared for this, he was. Not at all. As he summoned the monster his master had given him, Shigaraki's confidence crumbled and his voice faltered. "Kill everyone you can." The Meve black creature erupted out of the lake, screeching and charging at All Might. The mountainous blonde had learned to control his rage after his first attempt to impale All Might, but given his control over the much weaker thugs he had already knocked out, Shigaraki would probably survive to be primed for whatever information they managed to extract from him. Now that the wound was completely healed, Nomu threw an earth-shattering punch at All Might, bending the light post in the process. Whenever All Might was knocked out by a powerful enough blow, the creature would attack the people nearest it, including All Might. It is expected that he is weaker. Shigaraki shook watching All Might and Nomu trade blows, with All Might overwhelming the creature with unwavering fury before unleashing a devastating uppercut that truly sent the creature hurtling through the ceiling and into the sky. The fight was only partially seen, as both fighters moved too quickly for him and Kurogiri to keep up with most of the time. "We need to." Arg. His attempt to give the command to retreat was interrupted by bullets that sliced through him, scorching hot metal as they lodged in his extremities. After observing the condition of their pupils and colleagues, the other UA professors had arrived and were equally furious as All Might. The moment Kurogiri got them out of there, mist filled his vision. Knowing he had let Sensei down stung more, even with the bleeding holes in his body. Inform Mike. The voice hero folded his arms and tried not to frown at the two students that Tsukachi was going to question. Of the students in CL1A, 18 remained at the USJ. Iida was left behind at the school after warning everyone about the threat, and Midoriya and Recovery Girl were taken to the hospital to help 13, Shota, and him heal. Hizashi clenched his teeth at the prospect of his best friend being severely injured. He wanted to track down the perpetrators and yell them out. Nezu had given him the command to stay out here with the pupils and himself for that purpose, while the rest of the staff searched for and apprehended all of the villains who had escaped. Nomori, it must be said, was every bit as angry as he was, but without the destructive propensity. Thank you for your patience. Hizashi heard the door open and turned to see Tsukauchi enter. Nezu peered up from where he was sitting on Hizashi's shoulder. Gently speaking to the trembling Hagakure and the furrowed-looking Mineta, the man stated, "Before we started, I wanted to make sure all of your CL mates were safely with an officer. Are we the only ones being interrogated here?" Mineta exited with a severely broken nose, leaving a trail of red-stained wet wipes on the table from her attempts to remove the copious amounts of dried blood. "Your sensei Aizawa asked that you two be questioned about something that was spoken during the USJ incident before he was rushed to urgent care, but we weren't able to gain any information from him before All Might hurried him out." Tsukachi clarified, saying that Aizawa had only been able to communicate the commands to the personnel when they came, before feeling secure enough to faint. "She rubbed my nose in it." Mineta gestured with her finger at Hagakure, who growled angrily, and Hizashi was certain that she was giving the small pupil a glare. Upon glancing at Tsukachi, the man displayed a truth sign, demonstrating the cop's usefulness of his lie detector in such situations. "You eerie little bastard, you earned it," Hagakure screamed at Mineta, forcing Hizashi to intervene fast to keep the two apart. Language. The girl received a stern reprimand from Nezu, who also demanded that she justify her CL mate's nose breakage during a villainous attack. "When we landed in the mountain area after the foggy villain flung us through a warp gate, Mineta started screaming about how he didn't want to die." The girl gave a disgusted shudder, and her exaggerated body language made it obvious. "It's reasonable to want that." All three of the grown-ups knew there had to be more, but Tsukauchi spoke cautiously. Then he began complaining that he still hadn't kissed a girl or caressed her ass. Eventually, the enraged female went on. Mineta decided to refuse to die without having the opportunity to grope someone, and she attempted to paw and leap on me as we were surrounded by bad guys. "You tried to ally abuse your student during a villain attack, putting her in danger?" Even if Hizashi's voice wasn't loud enough to break GL, it was nevertheless loud enough to shake the windows of the little office space they were renting at USJ. "You don't have proof." Mineta angrily retaliated against the girl, and Hizashi recalled Aizawa's earlier year report of the child's desire to locate or construct a spy hole in the girl's locker room. "I have a strange talent for spotting lies." Mineta paled, and the detective's voice was cold. "I know she was telling the truth." Tsukachi reached up to his collar and radioed in another officer. "Mineta, I'll be having you give the remainder of your statement to another officer considering the activities you were trying to do to this young girl earlier. I would advise you not to embellish or lie because, just to be clear, I will be reading your statement afterward and verifying with you that it is accurate. Do we understand each other?" "Indeed." The youngster nodded, his eyes wide with horror as he trembled and started crying. A tall and strong officer came and escorted Mineta away while Tsukachi finished, gently, interrogating the girl, her wrath leaving her after Mineta was gone as she broke down into tears at what he'd tried to do, and what had occurred to Midoriya when the boy fought to protect his CL. Hizashi murmured to himself, "Ing hell, this is a mess." And by the sound of Nezu's irate mumbling, he knew the day was far from over. Sitting by himself in his chamber, Kaminari held out both of his hands, his teeth chattering and his eyes burning with resolve. Kaminari had only gone outside to eat and use the lavatory since the police had brought him back home and the school had announced that lessons would not be held the rest of the week and would resume on Monday. His entire conscious awareness was focused on the work he had ironed himself. "Come on." As Kaminari attempted to perform something he had never done before, his right hand trembled while his left hand sparkled and danced with the lightning of his quirk. "You must obey me, damn it. You are my power." After a few more seconds, Kaminari released the air he had been holding without realizing it, his power dissipating at the failure of yet another attempt to absorb energy, this time his own. "Something must be lacking from my life." With restless energy coursing through his body, Kaminari's leg jumped as he resumed browsing the internet for anything related to regular electricity or the few hints other users of electricity quirks would share. It was difficult for him to get any quirk training guidance online since he was afraid of villains, and much of the help he did find was done in person by other individuals, which made his predicament even more difficult. With a groan, Kaminari leaned back in his computer chair and sniffed, then winced, realizing that before Cleese started back up, he really ought to at least include taking a shower in his list of things to do. It was most likely simply the stench that was hindering concentration anyway. His parents' relief was evident when he eventually sat down to supper, his hair still wet from the shower. Had their concerns been genuinely aroused by his working so hard? "Hello, my love." As he sat down, his mother smiled and placed a dish for him at the table. "Is he still training?" "I must." Kaminari's knuckles went white as he held his fork, saying, "I can't after the USJ, not again." Even though he'd been studying more over the past several days, he still struggled at times to express his intentions clearly. "I mean, your mother and I have seen how serious you have been about this." With a proud nod, his father said, "I got something for you. According to the reports, this was yours, according to the police I spoke with after they investigated the matter." Pulling up a bag, his father placed the aluminium chain from the USJ on the table next to Kaminari's position. Kaminari shuddered to see his reflection in the shining metal, which appeared to have been polished by the police before being given back to his father. Once more, he smelled Midoriya's burning flesh. He heard the criminals and Midoriya both screaming in agony. Witnessed the dazzling light flashes from his quirk going into full force. "Take that thing off of me." With a slash, Kaminari toppled over his chair and scrambled back against the wall, his breathing coming in short gasps. The chain flew off the table. His parents hurried over to attempt to console him as he shook and breathed frantically and shallowly, remembering the USJ and his failures. He didn't need the chain, he didn't need more means of inflicting harm, and he didn't need to strongen his peculiarity. More than anything, he was in need of control. Yaoyorozu with trembling fingers, Yaoyorozu meticulously examined her documentation of the events that occurred at the USJ and the models she had created. Experiment after experiment, concept after concept, all aimed at determining how she could have performed even more. How she may have iced it in the absence of Midoriya obtaining. Yaoyorozu took a hard bite out of her breakfast and swallowed the thought that she might not be cut out for the UA hero track. What actual ice stance had she provided at the USJ? She had only made a chain in the water. It was Kaminari who had really used it, who had determined how much power to employ and who had defeated the army of evildoers who had come to kill them. After rescuing her and Kaminari from the initial plunge into the lake, Asui managed to get them to safety on land. The CL president was her. She was meant to guide and safeguard her CL mates. "Yaoyorozu, miss. I brought your food," the nervous maid yelled out as they handed her another meal. Her chamber was a jumble of things she had made with her quirk, frantically trying to increase the intricacy and speed of her creations. "Do you really think you don't need a nap, young miss?" "I don't require sleep. I need to get healthy," Yaoyorozu thought to herself as she pushed down the food and her skin glowed prismatically once more. "I can't be worthless once more." She owed Midoriya a debt for what she had done, and she owed it to her CL, no matter how long it took. Mina took a deep breath and sprinted through the USJ, tears streaming down her cheeks. She carried GL, broken tree shards, broken stone, and blood. She could hear her professors and pupils screaming in terror all around her, but she was unable to locate any of them, only the evildoers who were out to murder everyone. When she got too close, the said villains would paw and swipe at her, driving her and trapping her in the Plaza Central, where she saw the giant black monstrosity raining blow after blow upon the stunned Midoriya, and the villain seated on Aizawa's mutilated but still living body. "Not at all." Mina cried out, "No," when she saw the one student she had managed to find getting battered. Desperate to help, she ran, but no, acid shot out of her in proportions she had never experienced before, shooting like a geyser from her arms, legs, and chest towards the enormous black beast. Nothing of it survived. There was a black misty portal blocking the road, ing up her acid as multiple gates opened up across the USJ, raining acid down on everyone but her, the black beast, the mist villain, and the hand villain. She heard the villains, her teachers, and even her friends screaming in pain. As she watched, helpless to stop the acid from rushing out, Her body grew weaker and weaker as the torrent continued. She witnessed Midoriya, one of her closest friends, melting before her eyes. All the while the psychopath chuckled at that filthy hand-covered villain. She then woke up. Lights blared to life throughout the house and those adjacent, and Mina had to realize after a few moments that the screams echoing through her bedroom were actually her own. Mina. Her father barged through the door, his big, worried eyes much like hers. What's wrong? Mina shook and held on to her father while crying and reliving the nightmare, which was just the most recent of many, in her thoughts. She watched her mother watch them from the doorway, worried, then heading out to quiet any agitated neighbors her fearful scream had awakened. Project after another exhausting day of patrols, Endeavor came home, rubbing the back of his neck. His body had just pegged through the front door when his older surviving son, Natsuo, grabbed the front of his hero uniform and growled, "Are you happy, you bastard?" His son, who he knew hated him, yelled, his eyes wide and filled with resentment. In an attempt to force Shoto to unleash his fire, "You make him afraid of his mother's ice, right? What topic are you discussing?" With anxious eyes searching his older sons, Endeavor demanded, causing Fuyumi to wring her hands. Considering what had happened recently, Endeavor calculated the most likely scenario and took Natsuo's hands away. "Where is Shoto?" "Tea room for training." With Natsuo still looking angrily, Fuyumi swallowed uneasily as Endeavor strode by her and her brother. Upon arriving at the dojo, Endeavor noticed his youngest child leaning against the wall and trembling, with a surprisingly small amount of ice in the room and a much rougher quality than he had suspected. Is this place for self-gratification? With panting, Shoto felt the ice creep up and down his son's right side. What took place? Walk me through the event. Endeavor refused to take the bait, settling into a routine that, although comfortable for him, would be foreign to any of his children. Why should I care? Shoto appeared perplexed at first, but he soon reverted to his typical fury. Shoto, it's harmful for you and everyone around you that you're terrified of your own power. With a strong tone that suggested no wrangling, Endeavor said, "Now tell me what happened." Despite his skeptical appearance, Shoto gave in, probably because the USJ made no mention of flames. I had no trouble using my ice to defeat the bad guys in the region one had first arrived in. Upon arriving at the square, I witnessed a student struggling against the biggest of the thugs and losing. I launched ice spikes to slow down and impale parts of the villain, but a portal emerged in their path, causing my CL mate to be attacked by the spikes and other 1A strikes. Shoto trembled, appearing on the verge of ping out. My spikes pierced his body, severed one of his ankles and feet, and punctured his chest. I noticed a lot of blood. You now see the incident replayed every time you use your ice, witnessing what you did to a fellow soldier. Getting to his feet, Endeavor studied his son carefully before answering, "Do you want to be taken off the hero track?" What the heck? Shoto stumbled backward and then squinted, questioning, "What about your great creation? Since I can remember, you have always encouraged me to be a hero." You mentioned wanting to be a hero. Endeavor gave him the cold shoulder, "So I trained you because you never said that was the case anymore." I did not train Natsuo and Fuyumi since they did not want to be heroes. Toya wanted to be a hero, but I pleaded with him to choose a different route. You might be upset with my methods of training, but at least I gave you and your siblings an option. I didn't. Endeavor forced back the memories of the death of his firstborn child. How come? Endeavor realized he'd never actually talked about his family background with any of his children, and Shoto blinked in confusion. Our line was the first to ever display a fire quirk, and our progenitor was one of the first professional heroes of Japan. Shoto. Endeavor realized he was delivering an almost verbatim lecture on the same subject that his father had taught him when he was a little boy. Ever since, members of Japan's defenders who held significant positions in the Japanese government have come from his family. You mentioned having siblings. Shoto scowled, maybe because at some point the youngster had never met any relatives other those who lived in this house. Possessed siblings. I was the youngest of 7 children, and for a brief while, Endeavor's fire bears went out before he regained control of himself. One died during their work study in their 2nd year, while 4 ped away before they were old enough to enroll at UA. And the final one? Shoto observed the boy, perhaps searching for any indications of deceit. Was born without any peculiarities, and when he reached adulthood, his parents cast him out into the streets. A week later, his body was discovered. With a clenched fist, Endeavor recalled his favorite older brother. They killed my siblings because they gave none of us a choice. That's not what I would do. You stated that you wanted to be a hero, therefore I groomed you for that. I will take you out if that is no longer the case. I'm going to be a hero. With scorching eyes full of defiance, Shoto growled. Then stand up, it's training time. The ice in the room was quickly melted by Endeavor. I refuse to use my fire. Shoto demonstrated that he was still rather rebellious. Our job is to train your ice. Endeavor met Shoto's gaze and said, that's the problem right now. You worry about inadvertently hurting someone or killing them. Therefore, you need to get better at restraining and holding someone without hurting them. Fire your ice at me, restrain me even through my heat cloak, he said, raising his body temperature. Or is all that you said about being a hero just talk? Shoto retaliated with a lightning bolt of ice that smashed into Endeavor and melted against his skin. Shoto, keep going. Another wave followed, and this time, Endeavor didn't even blink as Shoto seemed even more determined to target him. He had iced at other sidekicks in overcoming a similar problem that almost all superheroes faced at some point. He had simply not anticipated having to east his own child with it at such an early age. Aizawa, clad in bandages but still able to move about. Aizawa stood in front of his CL and observed the 19 students there. He could see sleepless bags under his eyes. They'd eaten fewer meals, and he could tell they were a little slimmer. He saw resolve, fear, fury, and trauma. However, there was more desperation in the instance of one student with purple hair. He was annoyed by the concept, recalling the accounts the police had obtained regarding Minetta's conduct during the incident. Aizawa was ready to remove him immediately, but the heroic commission of all people overturned him. The commission declared that Minetta should be granted another shot, citing the horrific experience of the USJ as extenuating circumstances. They did not want to discard a prospective pro-hero, whose quirk was ideal for controlling villains without fear of expensive collateral damage. That meant they had to issue Minetta with a deadline, that if he wanted to stay in the hero track, he had to win them over and prove he was worthy by the end of the sports festival. It didn't matter to the youngster if he understood the situation or made the same errors as the majority of people who received that ultimatum. Regardless of Midoriya's absence, he was ready to start when the door slid open. I apologize for being late, sir. My phone was broken at the USJ and I haven't had time to acquire a new one yet. The train was delayed. As he peered through, he noticed that Midoriya appeared whole and fresh-faced. There were no bags under his eyes, no haggard features from starvation, and no trembling terror from the ordeal. Midori. Mina sprinted over, clutching him desperately with her wide eyes as she felt and saw that all 4 of his limbs were fine there and that I was entire. But my acid? How? Little Kirishima and Uraraka, along with the rest of the incident's participants, were running to the boy and equally perplexed. I heal, as I said. Midoriya grinned. Thanks to Recovery Girl, it didn't even require the entire 24 hours as I had anticipated. Mina began to cry and sob while holding onto Midoriya's shirt and muttering that her quirk had wounded him in the way that it did. It's no great issue, Mina. You didn't mean to harm me, Midoriya replied, sending a chill down Aizawa's spine. Midoriya smiled warmly, forgiving his friends and CL mates, but he didn't seem to care much for himself, his health, or possibly his life. Easy forgiveness and indications that the youngster wasn't disabled would probably aid in his CL mate's emotional healing, but Aizawa's worries had grown. Midoriya didn't know how to improve his unhealthy mental state. With a self-urged smile on his face, Bakugo strolled through the UA hallways en route to his CL, his demeanor remaining unchanged as he mentally absorbed all the rumors and details he had learned from the CL-1A USJ event. Prior to him, CL-1A had been granted access to the advanced training part. The USJ that contained CL-1A had been attacked by villains. One of the CL-1A students had suffered a major injury. For unheroic acts, during the USJ, a student in CL-1A faced the possibility of being expelled. If they didn't prove themselves at the sports festival, which took place in a month, they would be expelled. Neither of the first 2 variables had been foreseeable. Since villains were by definition crazy and foolish, no one could have predicted that they would target UA, particularly once All Might began working here. Prioritizing CL-1A over 1B had been too ridiculous to contemplate prior to its occurrence. However, the other 2 factors were quite logical. Naturally, one of the members of 1A was injured, and another member of 1A was in danger of being ejected from the hero track. DEKU was in that CL. The worthless most likely attempted to flee a battle, caught the bad guy's notice, and suffered injuries as a result. Bakugo, fully aware of his decision, concentrated more on sneering at the foolish trio who were approaching him rather than moving aside. A trembling, pathetically ugly elf mother a blonde guy cosplaying as Tin and the Fallout guy in a terrible fusion. And some airheaded bimbo with blue hair. Whoever they were, they had better sense up and move off from him right away. Aizawa rubbed his face while sitting in his office, remembering the lecture from yesterday and feeling much older than he actually was. Taking Izuku away, he attempted to gauge the boy's mental condition and was not happy with the outcome. The youngster appeared truly indifferent to the events that transpired, giving no consideration to the severity of his injuries. He was startled out of his reverie by someone knocking on the door. When the three huge players from UA came in, two of them smiling like ogre lions and the other hiding behind his more daring friends, he rapidly raised his hard teacher voice. "Greetings, Sir Eraserhead." Tagada joyfully waved. "Sorry for being late. We ran into an irate first year who seemed to want to fight. He was so cutesy grumpy." Hado clapped like a small Pomeranian, laughing and hopping up and down. Bakugo would be that. Aizawa let out a sigh, slouched down, and displayed his fatigue as the three third years became agitated. They knew something was wrong if he had called for them and was allowing them to witness him in this state. "Ho, did you handle him?" The teacher from his homeroom arrived to pick him up. "Sir, what brings us here?" Tagada looked closely at him, observing that despite his ordinary manner and looks, the youngster was far smarter than most people thought. "With one of my first years, I need your stance." Aizawa pulled out a simple dossier about Midoriya. "If all three of you agree, you'll essentially be his training partners." Partners for training? While Imajiki studied the file and blinked in confusion, Najire thought, why can't he train with his CL mates? After the USJ, they're too scared to fight him. Aizawa noticed the light bulb go up in their eyes as they realized that, yep, this is the student who was hurt. He was still unsure of who had disclosed that knowledge are Mineta's circumstances, and for now he was only grateful that the identities had remained a secret. "Should you even be letting him work out at this point if he's injured?" Imajiki questioned tremblingly as she turned the page to learn about Midoriya's personality and how it would change. "He already returned to full health because he possesses a healing factor. One of the villains possessed a warping peculiarity, which he used to deflect multiple attacks from his CL mates at Midoriya. This is the problem. Even though they didn't initiate an attack, almost every student in that CL witnessed the outcome, and they are currently finding it difficult to combat him without experiencing flashbacks. Although things will improve with time, it is unfair to Midoriya to be without a trainer as his first sports festival draws near." But that's not all. There was no longer any goofiness in Tagada's countenance, it was serious. "For his own life, he is really worthless. Really, though I'm relieved he wasn't resentful of his CL mates for what transpired, he wasn't really disturbed by it. They didn't mean to hit me," Aizawa said, brushing off what had happened. He hoped the three would understand. His lack of concern for his own health and his reckless and impetuous behavior will only worsen now that he is aware that he can lose all of his limbs and still be okay the next day. "I hope the three of you could east him." "Why should we?" Najire ate her head away as Imajiki continued to hide behind the paperwork. At this point, Aizawa wasn't even positive if he was actually reading it. Surely a second year would be a stronger opponent than, well, us. Due to what Mirio endured and the ways in which you two supported him. When you first began to comprehend your quirk, I recall how reckless you became and how you flung yourself into any circumstance because you felt invincible and carefree. Mirio's eyes gleamed with comprehension as Aizawa spoke. "Midoriya, sure, his peculiarity might help him achieve that position in the future, but he's not there yet, and if he continues to charge into battles without thinking things through, he will eventually run across a threat to which he hasn't developed a defense and will perish. He only made it through the USJ because All Might arrived shortly after he was injured. If All Might had arrived even a minute later, he very likely would have been murdered by the villain spearheading the alt. Does he not see Hound Dog?" Imajiki gave a little eep and ducked behind his hands, but Tagada scowled as he removed the file from her. "He is, but he doesn't think he's flawed in any way." Aizawa shook his head, indicating that he had been uncooperative every time I had tried to bring him into that office. No, a friend would get through to him better, especially if they experienced comparable personality phases. Will you now east, my student? All Might, what is the purpose of this gathering, then? Gran Torino complained as Sir Night-Eye, recovery girl, and them settled into Nezu's office. I needed to locate a spot to see Night-Eye's lecture today. It has to do with my list of contenders and the overall scheme to transfer one for all onto a fresh peace symbol. After the USJ, All Might sighed wearily and wiped his face. However, it got me to thinking, and I want to discuss two things today. This seems like a major matter. Nezu smiled a little and hummed thoughtfully, I'll make some tea. I'd want to let Aizawa in on this information first. All Might, tuning out the quirky chimera, who, to be honest, never gave up any pretext for tea, steeled his thin fingers and stared at everyone else in the room, everyone but Detective Tsukachi, who knew his secret and was presently seated around him. And Vlad King, too, if you believe he's prepared. He was leaving that choice to Nezu and Recovery Girl as he was unaware of both the Blood Hero and the Erasure Hero. Since they have the most interaction with the pupils, you are interested in hearing their opinions. The young girl gave a serious nod. Aizawa is a fantastic hero, and it makes sense. Vlad is more quite capable of being competitive, but he would never put the well-being or future of the pupils ahead of his own ambition to usurp Aizawa. I can understand the reasoning behind this, even though I disagree with the notion of more people being aware of one for all than is necessary. Night-Eye wrinkled his brows and pushed his spectacles up. You mentioned that there were two aspects, so Ayume the other is more complicated? I question whether having a symbol of peace is still a good idea. Shaking his head, All Might said, I know it was needed when I first stepped onto the scene, but I'm wondering if it's what's best now. He then raised a hand to quell the sudden protestations he knew would come from his former sidekick. The USJ was pursuing me in the symbol of peace, which is why the incident took place. Because when a society is supported by a single pillar, it only takes the removal of that one item to cause the entire structure to collapse. The other heroes these days merely lack motivation. Take a look at the top 5 heroes, including me as the sole pillar. Some days, I don't even think Hawks wants to be a hero. He doesn't even want to be as high-ranked as he is. Edgeshot and Best Jeanist don't seem motivated to move up the ranks because they are content where they are. Among the heroes, Endeavor is the only one who appears sincere in his desire to outperform me. Even while he respected Endeavor, he was fully aware that, at least for the time being, the man's personal problems would prevent him from becoming a reliable symbol of peace. What, you're saying that you should just hang onto the oddity and let it become history? Sir Night-Eye appeared insulted by the whole idea. No, All Might shook his head, saying, my backup plan is to make an announcement about my impending retirement. Perhaps bring up certain health issues that have gone ignored up to now, as my wish is to use my remaining time to train the next generation of heroes. Hopefully, this will ignite a spark in the other heroes, forcing them to take up the slack and begin challenging themselves. He slapped a file with the unmistakable UA teacher's face on it, and who's better at keeping secrets than an underground hero? As for my peculiarity, well, that should stay private. Izuku finally located the training facility that Aizawa had instructed him to go to, frowning to himself. Since the USJ, all of his CL mates had been fighting him, their faces turning pale with fright the instant they got close. Mina and Kirishima had the same reaction. As most of 1A had recently grown much more open with him, it was one of the few things he'd been ready to bring up with Hound Dog, attempting to figure out why his friends and CL mates would react that way. Hound Dog had given him an explanation and had been quite understanding, that they were terrified of him rather than with him. That because the USJ was still too vivid in their memories, they would always see him hurt when they fought. The faculty had told him that it would get better with time and that he would be practicing with some upper years or on his own during his afternoon hero course periods until the sports festival, while his friends trained and overcame it. Izuku shook himself free of his thoughts and penned the door, periwinkle blue light suddenly filling his view. I'm so glad you're here, Mirio. He's all muscle like you are, the blue voice cheered as they fluttered around him, hair tickling his nose as it swung from their speed. Do you have a relationship? He seems green-haired. Is he connected to Sir Night-Eye? Hold on, what's your name once more? Have you decided on a hero yet? What do you call your oddity? Which hero is your favorite? Like me, do you have a circle of closest friends of your own? Is the irate Pomeranian in CL1B someone you know? Are you a pizza fan? Pizza is what I want? Izuku immediately began answering, blinking and using his brain to keep up with the fast-paced questioning. His motor mouth muttering served as all the training he would ever need to keep up with this girl's blabbering. Yes, I'm here. There are no Mirios in my family. I doubt that any pro-heroes, much less one who acted as All Might's sidekick, are linked to me. You can call me Izuku Midoriya. My hero name is still undetermined. We call my eccentricity adaptation. The water hose team is my favorite group of heroes. In 1A and 1B. I have several pretty close buddies. It sounds similar to Bakugo. When he said that name, his expression briefly darkened before he said, "Yeah, pizza is amazing." When he was done, he saw 3 distinct looks on his uppermen's faces that varied in shock. What? You responded to all of her inquiries. A blonde guy who seemed incredibly buff and possibly linked to All Might gaped. In that order. A man with dark hair and elven ears appeared astounded and shuddered. Now my gremlin. The girl with blue hair who had asked him a lot of questions quickly snatched him up and took off. Mine, quit. We have to train Najire, the fair-haired man pursued. But mine, as Izuku glanced to the males on the ground for support, or sanity, really, either one would be useful at this point. The blue-haired girl held him like a teddy bear. Does Yu need to be gotten? The female who was holding him up lowered herself, and the blonde guy, Murio, if he remembered right, tapped his foot on the ground. I'll be all right. The blonde apparent leader grinned, and she huffed. Excellent, enjoy a cookie. With the gracefulness of a preschooler, the girl gave a pleased squee and the dad took out a goodie from his rucksack. Izuku wondered if he should flee after glancing between the 3 strange persons he was alone with. Hello, I apologize for this. I'm Mirio Tagata, that's Najire Hado, and the guy trying to blend in with the corner is Tamaki Imajiki. The blonde guy gives him a laid-back smile. Given the state of your CL right now, Aizawa asked us to east you with your training. Regards. Izuku ignored his tense feelings and shook hands with the big man, but Hado grabbed Imajiki and pulled him out of the corner. Okay, so we'll be training your body and your peculiarity for the sports festival, but I also want to develop your mind. Mirio grinned. We can help you a lot because we are currently ranked as the 3 strongest students at UA. However, I'd want to do a little exercise to clear our heads and get to know one another before we start our physical training. We'll form a circle, introduce ourselves, explain how our peculiarities function, and share something significant about ourselves. Next, each of us will get one question to ask the other, and we'll have to try to come up with anything novel or intriguing that the other players could do with their peculiarity. Seems simple enough. With the blue-haired Hado leading the way, Izuku led them onto the training mats. The 4 of them sat in a circle, with Tagata's jar of cookies in the center for anyone in need of a snack. Let me get started. Tagata added, my name is Mirio Tagata, and my quirk is called permeation. When I use it, it allows me to pee through any tangible matter, but it also blocks out light, sound, and air, so if any parts of my body are permeable, I won't be able to see, hear, or breathe. And I be repulsed outward if I solidify again while within something else solid. Comedy, in my opinion, is crucial for a pro-hero since it's a fantastic way to diffuse tension and roar terrified bystanders. Hooray! About half the cookies were gone when Hado clapped, her cheeks filled out like a chipmunk. The girl swallowed loudly and smiled, saying, I'll answer the question and propose the idea first. Have you yet to ask Yu out? Don't Najire. Mirio furrowed his brow. But together, the 2 of you would be adorable. With a sneer, Najire flailed wildly before thinking, I don't remember, have you tried making other people permeable? I tried it, but all I could manage to do was make myself as breathable as possible, as my hero suit attests to. Without even blinking, Tagata turned to face Imajiki. Is ramen still being served later? The youngster appeared to give up, but considering how terrified he appeared to be, Izuku didn't object. Instead, Tagata just nodded. Have you ever tried pressing firmly when your hand or finger was locked to force it to unlock? I haven't, in fact. Before the 3 of them turned to face Izuku, Tagata jotted it down on a notepad. Can you go the other way from permeation for your quirk? Make your physique more robust to increase the durability of your punches. His brain was just now beginning to catch up after Typhoon Hado ped through, so he volunteered his quirky suggestion first, since it was something he was more comfortable with. What a great idea that is. Tagada grinned and gave him the thumbs up, enthusiastically noting, I'll definitely try that while we spar. Well, you're a goodie. And in response to my query, Izuku's expression darkened. Why wasn't just any random second year that Aizawa asked to spar with me, but the 3 best third years? Whoa, straight to the point. Huh? The question didn't seem to offend or surprise Tagada, and there are 2 reasons. First off, my fighting style is all about evaluating the situation and going for the kill. I don't bother dodging or blocking blows because my quirk prevents me from being struck when it's in effect, so I'm the greatest person to help you with fighting. Despite the fact that, based on what little he said, yours doesn't operate the same, receiving my basic training would probably be beneficial. That made sense, and they appeared since we all go where one of us does. On certain days, we might even drag our friend Yu along. Then I suppose I can go next. Izuku Midoriya here, and Izuku found the arguments presented to be logical. I have a metamorphosis quirk called adaptation that allows me to fortify myself against different kinds of harm or danger. I can withstand them more the more of them I'm exposed to. It also has a healing factor, which means that within 24 hours, I can recover from anything that hasn't killed me. However, since the healing factor is the only component that remains active even in the absence of transformation, I must change in order to be resistant to everything. Oh my goodness, it's my turn to inquire. Hado leaned forward excitedly, chewing on a cookie once again. Have you made friends in your CL yet? She adores romantic fiction. As Izuku flushed and stammered, Tagada extended an offer. No, flustered at the idea of even shaking hands with a girl, Izuku shook his head. Pooh. Hado blew out her cheeks and thought about his peculiarity. Would your altered condition cease to need food and drink if it went without food or water for a while? I've never really given that much thought or tested it. Tagada cleared his throat tensely, and Izuku thought about the possibility. Midoriya, please never attempt it without a doctor's consent and close supervision from Recovery Girl. Izuku nodded hesitantly as the blonde man implored, sensing that there wouldn't be many occasions when that kind of resistance would be helpful. Why do you think the water hose heroes are the best? Imajiki looked inquisitive even as she blurted out a response. Yes, I suppose the majority of people would rank among the top 10. Izuku laughed. To be truthful, I would have said, All Might, before last year, but then I met the water hose team and they saved my life. They were among the first people to ever tell me I could be a hero, to believe in me, and to give me encouragement. It occurred soon after he believed he was about to die, making it both one of his most horrifying and nicest memories. Are you able to perform partial transforms? When Imajiki asked that question, Izuku froze. He inclined his head. He was aware that it was feasible. Hell, why hadn't he tried to use his eccentricities to change himself? He saw his hardening buddies pick how much to change each time they used them. I suppose not. Tagada gave him a pleasant shoulder rub, but that's precisely why collaboration is beneficial. You can obtain a better understanding of the big picture by exchanging thoughts with people who have different viewpoints. I therefore wanted to know if you had mastered the art of using your untransformed condition for combat. Hey. Confused, Izuku blinked. What in the world did Tagada mean? Even though his untransformed state was weak in comparison to his transformed condition, why wouldn't he choose to remain changed in a battle if he could? You're going to get it. With a playful twinkle in his eye, Tagada made good on his word. How did you find out about the Bakugo child, I wonder? He's a guy the first grew up with. Izuku's face went black as he relived every swear, every taunt, the searing sensation of nitroglycerin scorching against his skin, and the foul stench that would ensue. He was so engrossed in those recollections of a position that the water hose duo had iced at him in accepting that it was neither normal nor friendly that he failed to see the serious looks exchanged amongst the 3 older students. Yanagi with sharp breaths. Yanagi dashed along the corridors, avoiding obstacles at every turn and occasionally even taking off into the air thanks to a peculiarity. Whenever someone became upset with her for rushing past them, she didn't care. When she stormed out of their CL room at the conclusion of the school day, Tetsu and Tokage following closely behind, she didn't give a damn about how some of her CL mates had responded. She didn't give a damn that she had continued to run at full speed from the beginning. What Kirishima had texted her was all that mattered to her. She had been informed by Kirishima and the others that Midoriya had suffered injuries at the USJ. She discovered that Midoriya had not replied to any of her texts since, and her 1A pals had informed her that his phone had been damaged during the raid. His mother had made him go straight home after his first day of CLEs, but she hadn't been able to see him yesterday because her CL had run late. She was now aware of the room where he was receiving training, and she was determined to ensure his safety at all costs. As Reiko slid to a stop, she saw that Midoriya was fighting a blue-haired third year who kept hitting him with energy blasts that he was too big to avoid. She doubted that Midoriya had ever been exposed to energy blasts before to build up a resistance against them. Her 1A friends had told her that Midoriya had been sent to the training room. Then she caught sight of that bright glimmer she always loved to see in his eyes. She could see the gears in his head turning as he leapt for another blast, shrinking in midair as it missed him. He transformed back into his enormous gray form midway through the punch he was about to deliver to the shocked brunette, hitting his opponent squarely in the face and sending the girl flying. Midoriya! She inhaled, causing her companion to look up in shock. Their eyes briefly met before she sprang forward, moving quicker than she had ever moved before. She gave him a strong hug, assured herself that he was here and would be okay. I suppose lessons are over now. We must have lost track of time when the blonde third-year student saw him holding the brunette back while she writhed and squirmed in his grasp, a large hand covering her mouth even as she attempted to speak quickly. Are you a friend of Midoriya's? Among the greatest. Reiko glowed a hot scarlet at the comment, and Midoriya nodded. Yanagi. As she turned to face the door, she noticed Tetsu and Tokage panting heavily and realized she had left them behind. Please, don't run so quickly. The metal oddity, who was never one for speed, panted. In what way were you bouncing off the walls? Tokage still had to exert effort to arrive as quickly as they did, but she was less exhausted. What? She was staring at her pals, perplexed, and for once, her sentences were cut off. Yanagi, you were running on the walls and practicing parkour. I believe you briefly FLW. Tetsu let out a wheeze. Reiko tried to compose herself, blushing at the realization of how frantic her mad sprint had been. I wanted to see for myself whether Midoriya was safe and well. I didn't want to hurt anyone in the process of trying to find out, but I also wasn't going to let them slow me down. It appears that in my resolve, I discovered new applications for my eccentricity that I had neither explored nor tried previously. When I have more time to myself, I'll be interested in studying it more thoroughly to completely understand its benefits. When she spoke for the first time, Midoriya only held her tight, hugging her back as she felt how warm he was, while those she saw listening had the vacuous eyes floating expressions she was used to. The brunette saw this also, and for some reason, she squirmed around happily, squeezing behind her CL mate's hand. Natsuo scowled into his coffee as he remembered how the bastard himself had attempted to act completely understanding towards Shoto the other day at the house. The whole thing felt so real that he couldn't stand it. Hello, Natsuo. He looked up to see Fuyumi sitting in the booth opposite him, grinning. Their little cafe where they could get together and converse private from dear old dad. Hello. With a grunt, he sipped deeply from his steaming coffee. Are you all right? His dark scowl caused his sister to seem apprehensive. Recalling the tiny antics of that guy from the previous day, Natsuo gritted his teeth, having gone to a friend's dorm the previous few days to gain some privacy. It wasn't an act, in my opinion. After we listened in between him and Shoto, Fuyumi winced and reached into her purse to retrieve a binder. She took out a few news pieces on all of their aunts and uncles' births and subsequent deaths. With the exception of their eccentric uncle, who was discovered with unusual-looking burns on his corpse, all of them perished as a result of their own eccentricities overheating and taking their own lives. When Endeavor had been in his last year at UA, it had even seemed that their grandparents had passed away from the same disease. An old picture of their father and his family was the last item to be taken out. He could see the familiar tight expression on each of his siblings' faces, along with multiple burns, scrapes, and bruises. He still made up that nonsense about Toya, though. Natsuo clenched his teeth, recalling his adored elder brother and Toya's fury towards Endeavor, holding the guy responsible for a great deal. Recalled the fire in which Toya perished. That wasn't a lie, Natsuo. Fuyumi cast a sorrowful glance down. I can still picture that moment. Toya's peculiarity continued to harm him even though he wanted to be a hero like all of his CL mates. He had mom's resistance to fire, not Dad's, and he suffered from a milder form of the same illness that Mom had to cure when she was too young to do so, according to what Mom and Dad told me. I had never seen him beg before, but that was it. Even after Toya pleaded with him to let him continue being a hero, he dismissed him? Natsuo tightened his jaw. It was Natsuo's dad who begged Toya to quit. He was begging Toya to take up a new hobby that wouldn't put his life in danger as he was on his knees. Even though Shoto was only a newborn and you were quite young, I doubt I will ever forget that day. I debated using the omake bello for this narrative at first, but ultimately decided against it. I figured I would share it with you all nevertheless. Omake All Might young Monoma, it's been a long voyage. At last you are ready. All Might roared with laughter in his belly as the blonde hero in training straightened up, his improved physique glistening with sweat. At last, the youngster was at a place where he could safely accept one for all. Let no one ever claim you haven't earned this. You have matured so much both mentally and physically. He would have been thrilled to see the youngster begin to let go of his grudge against 1A. Pulling a hair from his head, he reached up and held it out, saying, "Eat this, and the sacred torch of one for all shall be paid unto you." Finally, with wide-eyed eagerness, Monoma smiled as he took the hair and ingested it along with a tablet that Recovery Girl had created to speed up digestion and make the quirk transfer more smoothly. I sense it. Monoma let out a breath and continued with another of his animated giggles, and with every chuckle, All Might began to feel increasingly uncomfortable about something. As soon as the recognizable Kurogiri warp gate materialized and Monoma appeared unfazed, All Might realized he had been duped. It's unbelievable that the ruse was successful. Kurogiri sneered, mocking All Might. Thank you for the oddity, mighty symbol of peace, Kurogiri said. As Monoma ped through the portal, the shadow form mockingly bent down to bow, All Might's body too feeble to battle, especially since he had lost his peculiarity. Over the course of the following few weeks, he discovered that all of his theories regarding how One for All might impact Monoma's peculiarity had come to pee. The boy's impersonation of the idiosyncrasies was more powerful than the original. The peculiarities he imitated remained. He might now possess an infinite number of oddities. Sadly, All for One had also predicted those things. Okay, so what are your 3 opinions about him? Leaning back and interlocking his fingers, Aizawa faced the big 3 who had arrived early to discuss their impressions on the first training session with Midoriya the day before. He has excellent intuition. Not to mention intelligent, Tagata responded right away. In just a few moments after first meeting Najire, he was able to keep up with one of her full-speed question rants and respond to each one sequentially. Then he came up with fresh ideas for all of our eccentricities during our getting to know each other exercise, which you made us complete with the visiting schools last year. Which concepts? I was interested to see what the self-described quirk nerd might think of. If he continued to demonstrate talent in that area, Aizawa would have good reason to bring in additional staff to guide him and provide stability when necessary. Finding a suitable mentor for his other troublesome offspring would already require him, so taking care of this one early would merely provide him more time for naps later. For me, the goal was to harden my feet and fists as I struck, reversing permeation and increasing the force of my punches. Happily, Tagata exclaimed, "It works too. Generally speaking, I'm still getting used to it in the timing, so if I'm lucky, I can only handle it like I want 2 times out of 10. Whoa. Oh my goodness, next up, me." Hato excitedly jumped up and down. He advised me to focus on modifying the energy wave's size and rotational speed so that they might be used as a drill. Stupid problem child. Did you have to give her more things to break? Ignoring Hato's pout, Aizawa moaned. He called her Hurricane Hato as well. Helpfully, was Tagata's addition, and Aizawa approved of the moniker. He advised me to consume the hairs of other heroes to try and absorb some of their eccentricities. When Aizawa stopped, Imajiki swallowed anxiously as she imagined the horrifying idea that she should only discuss with her mentor hero and no one else. He gave the 3 of them a fixed look. This needs to remain a secret until we find out, and probably even after. If word went out, someone with that kind of power would probably attract a lot of unwanted attention or panic. Recognize? Respected sir. The trio acknowledged his statement by nodding. Now that we're back to the report, what are your 3 thoughts on him? Aizawa sat down to take notes. I understand your worries. When someone asked Tagata if starving himself or going without water would make it so he didn't need to eat or drink anymore, He really thought about it and gave a whistling Hado the side eye. There was only boundless interest, neither fear or horror at the concept, nor doubt. Luckily, I was able to convince him not to do that again without Recovery Girl's permission and oversight. Kill a rising bluenet, please. His sense of self-worth, nevertheless, is what matters most. When Aizawa turned to face the terrified child, Imajiki swallowed, but he went on. He said that, less than a year ago, he had met the water hose heroes, who were the first individuals to ever believe in him and his desire of being a hero. And that boy is adamant about going into this field of business. Aizawa was well aware of the experience of hearing from others for years that giving up on your dream of becoming a hero was a foolish endeavor. Yes. In a big way. Totally. The adolescents all gave him a nod of approval. I'm grateful. Aizawa gave a nod and maged his temples, saying, leave me in the know if anything else appears, and keep up the training sessions. Please proceed to your homeroom as I have another meeting to attend. Upon observing that the students had left, he locked up and headed towards the lift, questioning the reason between Nezu and All Might's interest in seeing him. All Might, who had given everyone else the key to One for All, was waiting for Aizawa to arrive while pacing back and forth in Nezu's office. When All Might heard the lift ding, he put on his public speaking mask and said, hello, Aizawa. How awful is the news, and how much will I want to slug you in the throat over it? Aizawa cautiously reached for the man's cozy sleeping bag as she gazed at them indifferently. All Might cleared his throat to start its a secret about my quirk, ignoring Gran Torino's giggling. We've already read everyone in this room in on it, but we felt it was important to read you in too. Neither my quirk nor the individual from whom I acquired it were original to me. There have been 8 users of this quirk, including me, since the initial generation of quirk users. And so the discussion went on, explaining exactly who had invented his peculiarity and how it operated. You're trying to find a replacement. Knowing that he had a limited amount of time, Aizawa surmised, Ayume the candidates are students, so you're asking for my advice as a teacher? Not just that, though. With a hesitant smile, All Might said, I've been thinking lately, including the necessity of a singular pillar standing in the limelight. Aizawa has always had the ability to unnerve him. A strong force battling the darkness might for good. Not at all, I reject, Aizawa said, raising his arms in an X motion. Not taking place, delete it. However, why? All Might sulked at the abrupt, firm rejection. With the stress of taking care of my out-of-control problem children during the day and performing my underground hero patrols at night, I hardly get any sleep at all. If you gave it to me, I would never be able to sleep a wink ever again. As he spoke, Aizawa withdrew into the yellow sleeping bag of safety. All Might groaned, not caring that Nezu was joining Gran Torino in laughing. He was still hopeful that Aizawa would succeed in the end or at the very least become an underground hero. In any case, as a fantastic hero and educator, he would value your feedback. I possess a roster of present contenders. Before All Might handed them to Aizawa, he saw that the guy had hardly gone through the list before Aizawa's capture scarf began to try to choke him. Aizawa gave a scowl, and only Night Eye bothered to try to save him from the furious teacher. You idiot, what the devil are you thinking about some of these? Air is needed in order to respond. All Might gave a pathetic wheeze. Todoroki Shoto packed his luggage and got ready to attend Sir Night Eye's optional after-school lecture on the nuances of working as a detective hero. The majority of his CL mates appeared keen to follow suit, with Kirishima, Uraraka, and Ishido announcing that they were on their way to fetch Midoriya so he could attend the function as well. What on earth is going on here? Shoto, in spite of himself, found himself glancing up when he heard the small purple pervert yelling from the entrance. He saw that a sizable group of people had collected outside their CL room, all of them sporting first-year pins from the general education courses and Hero CL1B on their uniforms. The majority of his present were forced to witness the famous CL1A, a worn-out, purple-haired general education student Shoto would insist is related to Aizawa grinned. This was especially true when it was mentioned that one of you would be demoted. Now that blood has contaminated the water, aspirants to the hero course are prepared to declare battle. A harsh and conceited laugh, you're focusing on the wrong CL NyQuil, interrupted Shoto as he was about to wish the Gen Ed boy luck in replacing the S, something Hagakure also appeared ready to do. Shoto was ignoring Minetta's pitiful whining. CL1B, my CL, is the one to watch out for. A pale blonde boy approached, putting up his hand in a clawed gesture, little sharp pops and explosions filling the palm. These additions barely made it past a couple of petty thieves. It's not shocking that there would be a lot of trash in any CL with that worthless green DEKU. A rush of ice cut off the bastard's words as everyone else in the hallway quickly fled the frozen prison that was binding the ash blonde to the wall. The thug peered into the CL room and sneered, "I see DEKU ain't here. That loser finally realized he'll never be a hero and give up on his stupid goal to be a." Shoto didn't realize he had created the ice until he was walking towards the angry, trembling bastard. The bastard's hands were entirely covered in ice, which seemed to contain his quirk, at least for the time being. "You came here to annoy us, after all. Congrats," Shoto said with a chilly stare. "You've done it. Breaking you in the sports festival will be fun for me." Given the references to green and not present, it was easy to determine who our CL mate, Izuku Midoriya, meant when Bakugo called him DEKU. Disrespect him once more, and you'll pay the price. He could hear other CL-1A members who had gotten tired of the unrelenting gray giant cracking their knuckles behind him. Shoto froze, looking out the window slightly over this thug's shoulder to see that his hair had become part of his peculiarity. With a mane of ice on one side and billowing flame on the other. A pair of horns, one for each of his elements, protruded from his head like an oni, and steam erupted from his new hairdo. Shoto shook himself and said, "You can get yourself out." His shock caused the ice and fire to crumble. He started to go, knowing that it was more necessary to figure out what had happened to his peculiarity than to obtain the lecture notes later. Endeavor quietly scowled as he turned the pages of the newspaper, his reading glaze firmly in position, taking in all the items pertaining to crime figures. After the USJ attack, a number of low-level criminals and thugs were removed from the streets, leaving the areas they ruled vulnerable and creating a power vacuum in the criminal underworld. This had a ripple effect throughout the country. Taking note of the locations of the worst cases, at least as reported by the day's paper, Endeavor began organizing more stringent patrols to increase security for the general public. Furiously working on a dissertation of some sort, maybe a thesis for Hercules, Fuyumi and Natsuo sat in their living room recliners and texted, occasionally glaring at Endeavor as if to make sure it was missed. With a loud bang, the door opened, startling Fuyumi and Natsuo as Endeavor leapt to his feet and his beard flared. Shoto, however, dashed into the sitting room, warning them to mind the door. With a sigh, Fuyumi reprimanded, it was obvious now that it wasn't some wild thief. "What's up with my weirdness?" Ignoring his sister, Shoto fixed his gaze on Endeavor, asking himself, why does it keep doing this? Shoto's hair turned into a long mane with a small pinched, focused expression. It was half fire, half ice, and two oni-like horns rose from his forehead. Fuyumi gave out a surprised squeal at her youngest brother's new hairdo, and Natsuo dropped his phone in disbelief. "It appears that you have already experienced your first outburst." With little hesitation, Endeavor nodded. "I had been wondering if, should you even grow one, your ice would be reflected." "Vent? What in the world is it?" With a frustrated groan, Endeavor rolled his own eyes and Shoto narrowed his. Shoto then removed his reading spectacles. "It appears that when I previously mentioned this, you didn't pay attention. Do you merely take my words regarding flames and their applications at face value?" Endeavor sighed again, the quiet revealing. A vent is a feature of flame oddities that reach a particular level of power. It involves expelling a fraction of your energy in a single, consistent way that you can sustain to absorb energy and release extra power. You were always supposed to be stronger than me, especially with the USJ and the training you've been receiving, so I'm not shocked you've already created one. However, why does it appear that way? Looking at the vent that was now visible above Shoto's head, Fuyumi scowled. When vents initially appear, they are fashioned by the quirk user's aim. Endeavor's look darkened a little. "I would say that you were upset and attempting to scare someone, therefore your oddity showed what you thought was sinister. If you want to change it, you need concentrate on quickly pressing the vent into the desired shape, else, you'll be stuck with it. The reason I'm trapped with this foolish thing is because of his mocking flickering bear." At his words, all three of his children blinked in confusion. "Wait. You know how absurd the firebeard looks?" Natsuo was so confused that he momentarily forgot his own hate. "I'm not a fool, Natsuo, despite what many would think or suppose. I realize now how ridiculous it seems, but when it first appeared, I was a teenage lad with no facial hair and a desire to resemble my elder brother, who I seem to recall had a rather spectacular full beard. Natsuo didn't stop laughing until his sister gave him an upside-down head cuff. Aizawa with scowls directed at the still-cowed All Might gathered in the corner. Aizawa took out multiple folders from his pile of candidates. These have separated into 3 groups. Not without some work, currently viable, and why the hell are they here, you moron? Words. Recovery Girl chastises but doesn't dispute the idea behind the labels. First, the possibilities that are affirmed no slapping down a stack of folders labeled Tokiyami, Midoriya, Monoma, and Bakugo. Aizawa did so. Their peculiarities. All Might started, but he quickly stopped when Aizawa gave him a stern look and raised her hand to signal silence. Bakugo is extremely aggressive, boisterous, and impolite. Even though we don't have any proof, we believe that he was a physically violent bully and already possesses a superiority mentality. If you gave him that much power, he would go it too far. We don't need his explosions to be much greater than he can honestly produce them, and he sweats nitroglycerin. I can already see that after he makes his sports festival debut, the number of explosion insurance policies will increase. All right. The others in the room winced awkwardly and agreed. Tokiyami is as a result of his already volatile and intelligent quirk. Supercharging that isn't a risk I'm ready to take because he sometimes finds it difficult to manage his peculiarity and doesn't stop going on bloody rampages just by being in a dark place. While Midoriya and Monoma have distinct motivations, they do share a significant one, which is why Aizawa irritated another contender. Since Midoriya already struggles to regulate his anger, I wouldn't want to see a significant growth in power until he improves his emotional intelligence. Like Bakugo, Monoma suffers from a superiority complex. What worries me, though, is how the government would react if either person acquired the quirk. You fear they would be used into weapons. Nezu's tone was somber, but understandable considering the principal's past as a real lab rat. You mentioned that this quirk, this one for all, amplifies the user's inherent power as well. Aizawa persistently opened the files of the 2 students. Consider the many consequences that could befall these 2. Monoma could either permanently retain the quirks he replicates, or duplicate a quirk that was more powerful than the original, if not both. If Midoriya possesses it, I may see his resistances to All Might strength fast growing. Who knows if at that time he could really die? With that combination of offensive and defensive capabilities, the government would seek to use him against other countries as a weapon of war and would paint him as a villain if he refused. He would already be in danger of other countries trying to kidnap him or send ladies to entice children out of him. No, if Midoriya got it, the target would be too large. That had not occurred to me. Sheepishly, All Might concedes, only to flash a million-watt smile. Just further evidence that I was correct to want to confide in you. Proceeding forward. Aizawa disregarded All Might, keeping his laughter about the hulking monster hidden. Those who would be possible only after finding some work. We have Kaminari, Todoroki, Iida, and Shinso. Fortunately for you, it appears that most of them have begun working on that. Since the USJ, Kaminari has been focusing on honing both his control and mental acuity. The event acted as a wake-up call. Todoroki has his own issues, but he seems more at ease now than he did before the USJ. So maybe he's moving past the issues he has with both sides of his quirk. Iida is too rigid and quick to judge things, but he's always seemed to be deep in contemplation ever since the USJ, so maybe he's taking those things into account for himself. Regarding Shinso, while his desire to be a hero is admirable and one for all may fit in nicely with his eccentricity. That is, if people weren't afraid of him. He lacks motivation and a strong work ethic right now. When he realized he was up against robots, he gave up on attempting to find a solution and never truly gave it his all during the entrance exam. Mineta was able to gather the courage to challenge the machines. Thus, watch them and, if necessary, give them some prodding in the proper path. Gran Torino gave a nod, and the others? And lastly, those that are still in operation today. Shiozaki, Yanagi, Hado, Kirishima, Kendo, Kamakiri, Shoda, Tetsu, Tsunotori, and Tagata all nodded in agreement. All exhibit some degree of viability when considering quirks, and other from Kamakiri's tendency towards competitive fighting. I don't see many problems. Any favorites? With evident hope of hearing something specific, Night Eye leaned forward. Some are more notable than others. Tagata and Hado are great heroes, but Aizawa acknowledged that they are almost done with school. There wouldn't be much time for them to devote as students to learning this upgrading. It would also be more difficult to explain because they are already quite well known. While Shota would have a terrifying degree of compatibility with the power, Kirishima and Tetsu are both good candidates from the first years, with comparable offensive and defensive skills. Yanagi had a good quirk to upgrade in a way that wouldn't be connected to all mights to help hide the true nature of your quirk. And Kamakiri would undoubtedly be a good choice. Though, in my opinion, Kamakiri would have to tone down his rivalry. His all-out physical fighting style would be equal to yours. At least things have improved for us from before. With a moan, Detective Tsukachi stood up and said, "I'll leave you all to confer. I have to return to the precinct. Since the USJ, small-time crimes and villains have increased, but please let me know if any further advancements are made." With panting, Izuku dashed through the maze-like course his tutors had somehow persuaded Cementos to construct. The big three were not only pursuing him here, but they had also brought their friend Yu Yu Haya with them, who was excited to participate in this excruciating training session. The labyrinth changed sizes as he moved, so he couldn't even stay in his more resilient shape. He could fit in some spots, but others were too small, so he had to go back. 1, 2, I'll be right over here. 3, 4 better hit the floor as Hado's voice resonated through the maze-like cement structure, somehow both creepy and endearing. He didn't even bother to examine it, and he knew that Hado's overly theatrical presenting style often left hints for him to follow. He narrowly avoided the wall that was about to blow in, her shockwave landing where his head had been. We're full of tricks, 5 and 6. Izuku felt the spirit gun strike singe him as he ducked from the girls, turned the corner, and ran straight into Amajiki. Haya's voice murmured in his ear as he frantically tried to dodge her most recent attack. 7, 8. I am only the lure. Izuku froze for a second, perplexed, realizing just as Tagata's punch uppercut him from the floor. The apprehensive lad replied with a wobbly smile. 9, 10, we'll definitely repeat this. When the cement walls eventually came down and the fourth-year students came to help him up, Tagata exclaimed with joy. Did we really need the song? Amajiki, who was still shy, was among the third years who nodded smugly as Izuku pouted and gave them a disgruntled expression. Exercise ought to be enjoyable, with pleasure, Hado declared. How enjoyable was that? Izuku fought the need to give the Bluenet's antics a face palm. For us, it was enjoyable. Najire hopped around excitedly, probably just having too much energy to properly contain, and Haya smirked and gave him a high five. That is merely icy Hado. Izuku sighed as the vivacious girl pouted. Please just give me the name Najire right now, it's so much cuter than my last name. She thrashed around like a cranky kitty. And if you'd like, you can call me Mirio. The taller blonde smiled and offered, but neither Haya nor Amajiki did the same. Just call him Tintin, in my opinion. The majority of our CL does it, Haya chuckled. Yu, you're such a cruel little sidekick. When his pal blew a raspberry at him, Mirio pouted. Since I'll be Najire's sidekick, I'm free to tease you whenever I choose. Haya also sounded rather arrogant about her reasoning. Who, exactly, is Midoriya going to be friends with then? Curious, Mirio edged his head. It's obvious that he will end up being that Unagi girl's sidekick. Najire rolled her eyes as if it were common knowledge that the two of them are adorable. Izuku noticed that he was blushing as Najire raved about him and Unagi being the cutest firstie couple ever, despite the fact that she cheerfully disregarded this information whenever it was brought up. He heard the training facility door open and watched Aizawa walk in, her appearance disturbingly solemn. Midoriya, we should speak. The 4 third-year students exchanged a look, obviously taken aback by the tone, and as Aizawa ushered him out of the way, they could see that Izuku's buddies were waiting for him outside the structure. Is there a problem, sensei? Even though he was trying to calm himself down, Izuku could feel his anxieties increasing. This probably wasn't a major situation. It's possible that Present Mike notified his teacher that he would need to take a lengthy vehicle ride. Don't worry, I've been preparing my speech if this has to do with the sports festival and I have to give a speech in my capacity as student representative. Admittedly, the thought of having to speak in front of others still seemed daunting. Midoriya. Aizawa sighed, appearing more worn out than Izuku had ever seen him. It's difficult to put it nicely. An incident happened earlier in the day. When Muscular, a serial killer, went on the rampage due to his peculiarity, the heroes of Waterhose faced him. I apologize. Izuku felt memories shoot through his mind, like if his legs were going to give way. Observing their appearance to save him from the sludge villain. Their support as they sent him to a qualified oddity specialist and started him down the path of appropriate instruction. Sending them an email explaining his admissions process to UA. Receiving a response, assurance that they would be pleased to host him for his internship and possibly even for his work study, and that they would be monitoring his performance at the sports festival. But they're gone now. His voice faltered, and he felt tears well up in his eyes, not bothering to stop them. An intense wave of wrath shot through him, tightening his teeth. Where was the person who killed them? He intended to discover this, Muscular, and shatter him. Izuku spoke in a somber and menacing tone. Ran away to tend to his wounds. Aizawa shook his head, not bothering to conceal information that would probably wind up in the public domain. They managed to severely hurt him and damage one of his eyes, so he would need to spend at least some time underground recovering. I understand what it's like to lose a significant other or an inspiration, Midoriya. Comfortingly, Aizawa put her hand on Izuku's shoulder. I try so hard to make sure you kids are ready for this world we live in, she said. I want to make sure talks like this don't have to happen. I won't be a hypocrite and urge you not to want to stop their killer. All I'm asking is that you make me two promises. What? For a brief while, Izuku experienced a recurrence of his stammer as his confusion at his teacher's remarks overcame his intense anger. Firstly, you do not take off and try to take this on as a vigilante. Don't throw away your life or your future for revenge, Aizawa said, glaring at him. Do not flee and attack him right away, but train hard and be determined to stop him if you ever come across him. And then there was the second. Izuku detested the amount of reasoning in his sensei's remarks, but he was fully aware that if the monster had managed to defeat heroes as remarkable as the Waterhose team, he would probably shred Izuku to pieces. Turn into a hero of whom people may be proud, everything for one. And so it begins. The bullet holes are healing up rather well, the excellent doctor said as he completed Tamura's most recent inspection and took off his gloves. You won't lose any movement, but the scarring won't go away if you follow my exercise instructions. With an angry expression on his face, I'll make them pay. Tamura grimaced at that and rose from the doctor's table, gripping his cane tightly. With his hand not gripping the cane, Tamura scratched his neck, giving off a hoarse voice. All those filthy brats, those damned heroes, everybody will pay. Yes, young Tamura, I'm sure you will. All for One was a nod to his personification of devastation, the wannabe villain still displaying the untamed desperation he'd harbored since childhood. But how are you going to accomplish that? Tamura glanced at him bewildered, as though the question was a ruse, and his gaze darted to a tank that contained a Nomu. Now, if you want to grow Tamura, you can't depend just on my strength and resources. The UA Sports Festival is almost approaching, All for One remarked. In keeping with the education theme, I have some homework for you. Take in the sports festival. Examine the pupils in the CL where your attack was unsuccessful. For each and every one of them, draft a proposed plan, and then return to inform me of it. Indeed, master. Before Kurogiri warped the youngster away, Tamura grimaced angrily at being refused new toys and at having homework assigned. He's not nearly ready. A fresh voice interrupted, and 4 screens descended, enabling the 4 other acolytes he had taught to converse with him. They were all too arrogant and lacked the strength or expertise to support their claims or aspirations at this point. He is aimless and undirected. The most senior disciple of his raised a thoughtful voice, verifying through his screen that he was still in the United States. More importantly, he has no competition to really challenge him. Someone who is not merely your enemy, but someone he wants to defeat for his own purposes. Maybe Eraserhead, the teacher who withstood the attack. The 3rd acolyte inquired from Egypt, where he was at the time seeking a new ally for his own objectives. Actually, I wanted to catch him to use in my own research. The youngest acolyte, aside from little Tamura, spoke up forth. His aims are moving forward steadily, but he would be a great et. Do you want me to come back and help again, boss? The final acolyte, who is presently in Germany, requested if I might gather my crew and return to Japan within a few days. He shook his head. No, he still has more to learn, and if I need to help him, I can use a few more resources that I have available. Tamura isn't quite ready to hear about all of you. Go ahead and manage your developing businesses as usual, and get in touch with me if anything goes wrong. Dismissed. The four returned to their different tasks and plans after he waved his hand to halt the calls. Do you think Tamura will be astute enough to attempt and observe All Might's replacement during the sports festival? The excellent physician inquired after becoming silent while addressing his followers. All one can do is hope. All Might. After giving the issue of candidates more thought, I further reduced the number on the list. As the only people to meet that day, All Might addressed Nezu, Gran Torino, and Sir Night-Eye. He paused to look up the correct word attention span, to utilize the power safely. To start, I've chosen to take Miss Hato out of the race, even though I know she'll make an amazing hero. All right. Nezu shuddered and nodded, wondering what his strength would do to someone possessing Nijire Hato's chaotic energy. I would rank Itsuka Kendo, Eijiro Kirishima, Reiko Yanagi, and Nirengeki Shoda as the best choices from the early years. With the exception of the 5 dossiers, All Might cleaned the table. However, once Aizawa thinks it's a good moment, I would like to gradually welcome young Midoriya into our trust. Because of the boy's peculiarity, my successor would have a great time dueling with him as they figured out how to appropriately use their newfound strength. Not to mention that he would be available if the worst happened and All for One or a replacement for his evil empire returned and a new emblem was required. Ume the worst, but hope for the best. Gran Torino gave a nod. Eventually, I had no problem accepting the Midoriya boy into our group. When I chatted with Sir Night-Eye following my lecture, he nodded and displayed a really astounding level of intelligence. Mirio also says good things about him. How about your 4 first-year applicants? Gran Torino studied their files with interest. Kirishima and young Kendo are already physically capable of using the power at this moment if I so choose. From what I've heard, Kendo is a great heroine with a wonderful temperament, so All Might nodded and was delighted to explain his explanation. Even though her quirk is straightforward, it would work nicely with One for All's heightened physical abilities, which I can give her further training for. A fish cannot be taught to swim, brat. It would ultimately be me who trained her. Gran Torino chastised All Might by swatting at High Head with a cane. To be honest, the only reason he managed to avoid it was because Recovery Girl had been doing it for years. Yes, okay. The young Kirishima coughed next to All Might. Of all the contenders, he should be able to endure the pressure of One for All the best thanks to his hardening ability. Since his quirk depends on stamina, an increase in his physical prowess would be quite beneficial. But Shoda and Yanagi aren't physically prepared to accept your peculiarity. The small mammal was drinking tea when Nezu noticed it. Not even near. All Might shook his head, but I believe that, of the remaining characters, One for All would go best with their peculiarities. Because of his peculiarity, Shoda is already able to perform a second impact that is always far more powerful than the first. If he combined his peculiarity with even a small portion of One for All's potential, he could produce far more than I could. His well-known tactical skills would be helpful as well. He had acquired those skills exclusively through the Hard Knocks school. Miss Yanagi, too? With a reduced number of options, Sir Night-Eye inquired while leafing through the more thorough dossiers. At the moment, her telekinesis can only lift around 1 human being's weight. All Might smiled, but with One for All's potential, it might develop to a level similar to the strength this quirk bestows to me. Additionally, it would be very dissimilar from my skills and manner to East in concealing the actual nature of this holy torch. The greatest option we now have, given the approaching sports festival, is to test these students. Nezu laughed ominously. Let's see what they can do. Aizawa, how did that go? Then, a steaming cup of coffee was waiting when he entered the staff lounge and Khan questioned him. He wasn't well received. I dislike telling students their mentor has passed away, but Aizawa accepted the drink with gratitude. Particularly if it's only their first year. The denial and agony on their faces never became easier to bear. They were decent individuals. Raising his own coffee in a quiet toast to the fallen heroes, Khan grumbled. To ensure that Midoriya arrived home safely, I made sure to invite his pals along. Aizawa mimicked the motion. However, I'm going to be a little picky about any possible internships he applies to after this because I want to make sure that whoever is mentoring him won't make things worse. Not helping matters is the hostility that exists between our CL rooms. Khan winced thinking about how agitated they all are. I wouldn't be shocked if some of them went specifically hunting for more to chew on in an attempt to outdo the other CL. Khan stared at him while he refilled and drained his coffee, realizing that I was genuinely considering a new training exercise to use following the internships. Combat matches consist of 2 teams, with each team consisting of a student from each CL. Make them cooperate and get along. Considering that 3 of our children are currently in true buddy groups, they would be excellent initial selections in demonstrating to the other students that getting along won't result in cats and dogs falling out of the sky. I will consider it. As Aizawa promised, I simply want to go home and sleep right now. Izuku gazing at the picture of himself and his mother alongside the water hose heroes while seated at his desk, Izuku was struck by the fact that the married pair had signed the photo after it was taken. It stung to know they were gone now and all he had left were memories. Izuku took up a piece of paper and began to recite the speech he had been working on for the sports festival. He had been watching videos on the internet featuring all of the remarks delivered by previous student representatives, as well as speeches by other government figures and pro-heroes. It was cheery and bright, but it meant nothing at all. Izuku tore apart the speech with fury and slapped up a new notebook, jotting down ideas as they occurred to him. He had to give a speech for now, but he could always alter it later to make it flow better. Something that was specifically him and accepted who he was attempting to be, much like the sports festival was intended for. His teacher had told him to be a hero they'd be proud of. I'm going to be. Thanks for watching.